My stepmother destroyed all my mother's treasured belongings and sent me photos of the ashes. Laughing as she did it, my anger erupted like a raging fire. This nightmare of a stepmother not only burned my late mother's keepsakes, but also caused my dad to end up in the hospital. Our relationship has always been rocky, and I'll never forget the night she drunkenly boasted about her actions. I burned it all. It was just junk, she said. You need to let go of your mom's memory. Think of it as a favor. I was speechless and just hung up. A moment later, my phone buzzed with a flood of messages from her, photos of ashes with laughing emojis. At that time, my dad and I were camping, so I woke him to share the news. He thought I was joking, but when I showed him the evidence, he went pale. He rushed outside his tent, clutching his chest as he had a heart attack. I called for an airlift, and it took 15 minutes for the helicopter to arrive. While we waited, my stepmother kept calling, but I ignored her. I held my father's hand tightly the whole time. He made it to the hospital and was taken to the ICU, where machines surrounded him. I sat by his side, watching him breathe, terrified at the thought of losing him. I wanted to be strong, but guilt overwhelmed me. I kept thinking that if I hadn't told him, he might have been fine, even though I knew that wasn't true. After what felt like forever, the doctors stabilized him. They said he was lucky to survive, but he remained in a fragile condition. Any more stress could be life-threatening. 4 days, I stayed close to him, anxious every time I stepped out of the room, fearing something might happen while I was gone. The doctors insisted he needed rest, but it was hard to find peace knowing my stepmother had destroyed my mother's belongings. My stepmother always seemed resentful of the way our family spoke fondly of my mother. Last Thanksgiving was the first time my dad introduced his new girlfriend, soon to be my stepmother, to the family. Everyone was curious and eager to meet the woman who finally brought some joy back to his life after years of sadness. I remember sitting next to my dad with my stepmother on his other side, her hand resting in his. She looked a bit nervous, which was understandable for meeting the whole family for the first time. As we were preparing plates for dinner, my dad kept reassuring my stepmother. The conversation, as it did every year, naturally shifted to memories of my mom. No matter how much time passed, she was always present in our hearts during these gatherings. Aunt Linda turned to my stepmom and said, "You're just as beautiful as Mary was," referring to my mom. "My brother sure knows how to pick them," she added with a smile. Everyone murmured in agreement, but I noticed my stepmom's smile falter for a moment. She quickly composed herself and nodded politely. As dinner went on, stories about my mom began to flow. People reminisced about how she made the best pecan pie, how she'd sneak an extra slice to my cousin Jake, and how she had a way of making everyone feel special. My stepmom smiled and nodded along, but I could sense tension growing within her. The atmosphere truly shifted when Uncle Joe began the prayer. We all bowed our heads, and as he always did, Uncle Joe led the blessing. "Lord, we thank you for this meal and the family gathered here today. We ask that you bless our food and our time together. We especially ask that you continue to bless Mary's soul. May she rest in peace and know she is missed dearly every day." The moment Uncle Joe mentioned my mom's name, I felt my stepmom tense up beside me. Her hand, still holding mine under the table, gripped tighter. Even though her eyes were closed for the prayer, I could see how uneasy she felt. That's when I realized she was bitter about my mom, about how we still spoke about her, and how, no matter what she did, she would always be competing with a memory. When the prayer ended, she quickly let go of my hand and took a long sip of her wine as the family echoed amen. My dad, completely unaware, smiled at her and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze, but I saw it. Later, during one of our hospital visits, my dad woke up more alert than he had been in days. He looked at me with tired eyes and said he needed to talk to Stephanie, my stepmom. I was worried about my dad and what might happen if we pushed my stepmother too hard, but my dad was determined. He wasn't the type to let things slide, and I knew that ignoring the problem would only make it worse for him. So, I agreed that we would confront her together. After my dad was discharged from the hospital, we decided to address the issue at home. The tension in the air was thick when we entered the house. My stepmother was casually watching TV, acting as if nothing had happened. Just seeing her made my blood boil, but I kept calm for my dad's sake. He told her they needed to talk, and when she noticed he was home, she tried to greet him with open arms. He pushed her away, leaving her stunned. She asked what was wrong, and he didn't hold back. "You know damn well what's wrong. You burned all of my wife's things," he said. For a moment, she paused, her face turning red. Then she tried to justify her actions, blaming him for still loving my mom. He told her that while he loved my mom, That didn't give her the right to destroy her belongings. She shot back, asking why it mattered if they were just things cluttering the house. The argument escalated as she screamed at him. I could see my dad getting angrier, so I motioned for him to sit down. I didn't want another trip to the hospital, but despite his weakness, he shook off my hand. This was all she had left of her mom. You threw it all away just to make space, he yelled. She rolled her eyes, dismissing his feelings, claiming he was being too dramatic. She insisted he couldn't live in the past forever and needed to move on. My dad replied that this wasn't about moving on, it was about respect. That's when I jumped in, infuriated that she showed no remorse. She retorted that it was her house too, that she was now the wife, and if we had a problem, we could leave. She even claimed we should be grateful to her for getting rid of my mom's belongings, saying it would help us heal faster and stop reminding us of her death. My dad countered that he paid the mortgage and that his name was on the documents. He demanded she leave immediately. This seemed to be the last straw for him, especially since she hadn't even visited him in the hospital. When she refused to go, the argument intensified. My dad's face went pale again, and I urged him to sit on the couch. I told her to leave my dad alone, but she didn't care about the pain she was causing him. Once his color returned and his breathing steadied, I helped him to bed. The next morning was unnervingly quiet, with the tension from the night before hanging heavy in the air. My dad, still exhausted and drained, remained in bed. I could hear his slow breathing through the thin walls. I went downstairs, half expecting her to be gone, but there she was, sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee like nothing had happened. She didn't even glance up as I walked in, her eyes glued to her phone, fingers flying across the screen. The phone call started soon after. First, my aunt called, confused and concerned. My stepmother had phoned her in the middle of the night, crying about how my dad and I were ganging up on her and treating her like an outsider in her own home. I tried to explain the real situation, but I quickly realized my stepmother had already twisted the story. Then, my dad's best friend called. He was worried, saying my stepmom had told him that my dad was losing control, unable to handle his grief, and was lashing out at her for no reason. She had made it sound like we were the ones at fault, that we were the problem. It became clear she was going to fight, and she wanted everyone to believe her side of the story. I glanced over at her, still sitting at the table, smirking as she typed away on her phone. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my coffee mug down on the counter, the sound echoing through the kitchen like a gunshot. What the hell are you doing? I yelled. She finally looked up and calmly said she was making sure people knew the truth, claiming my dad and I weren't in the right state of mind to deal with things, so she was handling it. I laughed at the absurdity. She was serious. I told her she was lying to everyone, and I knew exactly what she was doing, painting us as the bad guys. She said she was just protecting herself and insisted that people needed to know what was really happening in our house. She went on a rant about how she'd never been welcomed in our home, that we treated her like a placeholder ever since my mom died. I fired back, reminding her that this was my dad's house and she was just bitter because she'd never measure up to my mom. I told her she needed to leave, or I'd call the police. She stood up slowly, eyes locked on mine. We'll see about that, she said, brushing past me and leaving the house. As the door closed behind her, I knew this wasn't over. She was going to fight dirty, and if we didn't stop her, she'd take everything from us. After all the calls from family and friends, my dad's stress only got worse. He was barely sleeping, and it was taking a toll on his heart. The doctors warned us that if things didn't change, he might not make it. I couldn't stand by and watch her destroy him any longer. We needed to get her out of our lives, but she wasn't going to go quietly. That's when I realized we needed legal help. We found a lawyer who specialized in family law and began the divorce process. It was tough, and my stepmother fought us at every turn, but the harder she fought, the more her true nature came to light. She tried to play the victim and paint us as the bad guys, but the court saw through her lies. It was clear she had no remorse or empathy, just a selfish drive to get what she wanted, no matter who she hurt. The divorce was ugly. She dragged it out as long as possible, trying to drain us both financially and emotionally, but in the end, the court ruled in our favor, and she was forced to leave. We were finally free from her grip. After she left, it took time to heal. My dad's health slowly improved, though he was never quite the same. The stress had left him more fragile than before. We focused on rebuilding our lives, trying to find a new normal. It wasn't easy, and some days, the weight of everything we had been through felt overwhelming, but we had each other, and that was enough. We didn't talk much about my mom's things after that. The loss was too painful. Then one day, While going through some old boxes in the attic, I found a small envelope tucked away in a corner. It was addressed to me in my mom's handwriting. My heart skipped a beat as I opened it, and tears filled my eyes as I read her words. She wrote about how much she loved me and how proud she was of the person I was becoming. At the end, she wrote, "No matter what happens, always remember that I'm with you in every memory, every moment. I'm there." I held the letter close to my chest, feeling a peace I hadn't felt in a long time. My mom might be gone, but she was still with me, in every memory, every moment, and no one could ever take that away. As time passed, the pain began to fade. My dad and I grew closer, knowing we couldn't change the past, but we could shape our future, and that's exactly what we did. We moved to a new house, a fresh start. On our first night there, we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. My dad turned to me with a small smile and said, "We made it." I smiled back, "Yeah, we did." Through it all, I knew my mom was watching over us, and I knew she would be proud of the people we had become.
The bill comes to $3,000. If you can't pay, you might as well call your dad. I went to a high-end hotel of a client, hiding the fact that I'm the daughter of the company's chairman. The hotel manager, Susan, greeted me with a condescending attitude. It's surprising how she manages to be the manager of a luxury hotel with that kind of attitude. This could turn into a serious problem, you know? I warned Susan. That's why poor people are so pretentious. I bet your dad is just as poor, isn't he? Are you planning to apologize and beg for forgiveness alongside your dad? Susan repeated her malicious remarks with a loud laugh. 5 minutes later, when my father arrived, Susan's demeanor completely changed. Her previously confident expression transformed into one of pure terror. Her face turning pale. Her body began to tremble. I couldn't help but smile. I'm Emily, 45 years old. My father is the chairman of Smith Group, a major American travel company. He currently has a trusted subordinate serving as the president while he supports him from behind the scenes. Inspired by my father, I joined Smith Group over 20 years ago. Of course, it wasn't through any connections. I secretly applied for the selection process at Smith Group when my father had already retired from his position as chairman. During the interview, I never mentioned my father and passionately expressed my strong desire to join Smith Group. When I finally received the job offer, I was so happy that I cried. After accepting the offer, I informed my father and requested that he treat me as a regular employee. Although surprised that I had gone through the selection process without his knowledge, he ultimately supported my decision to join the company. We informed the president, but it remained a secret from the general employees. The reason being, if they knew I was the chairman's daughter, it would create a rift between my colleagues and me. Everyone would treat me differently or become distant. I wanted to be genuinely recognized by those around me for my abilities. That's why I wanted to join as an employee, not as the chairman's daughter. In the end, I'm really glad that my father accepted my feelings. Smith is such a common surname, and unlike my father who wears branded suits befitting a chairman, I'm not brand conscious and prefer plain clothing. Thanks to that, my identity as the chairman's daughter has remained undiscovered for over 20 years since joining the company. Some of the executives might have noticed, but I pretend to be oblivious. My colleagues around me seem to have no idea about my identity, and I'm happy that they all treat me in a friendly manner. My current job mainly involves selling package tours. On the first floor of our headquarters, there's a customer service counter where general customers come to visit. I always wear my uniform and attend to the customers. I listen to the requests of the customers who come to the counter and suggest the most suitable travel plans for them. It's the perfect job for me since I love talking to people. Recently, many people compare travel sites online and make reservations. But I'm genuinely pleased that there are still customers who make the effort to visit our counter. It makes me realize that what my father built has taken shape. I also secretly take on certain jobs from my father. This is a top-secret mission that even my colleagues don't know about. Only a few trusted individuals handle this job. The reason being, it involves the movement of large sums of money. If the person isn't trustworthy, it could lead to significant problems down the line. Therefore, every time I undertake this job, I feel a sense of tension. I've been working hard, taking pride in being entrusted with such a task. I want to continue doing my best in whatever way I can to help grow my father's company. On this particular day, I visited a certain hotel. It's the Miller Hotel, one of our clients. We often work with them for package tours. The plans that combine the Miller Hotel with flights are quite popular, and there are many customers who repeat. As a result, these plans are regularly organized. This time, I visited the hotel using my paid vacation days. The Miller Hotel is a classic hotel located in the heart of a hot spring town. The hotel has been in business for about 100 years, and its building exudes a sense of history. However, the interior has been renovated and is clean, so it doesn't feel uncomfortable to stay there. The previous manager here was a gentle person with refined manners and a beautiful presence. Despite being in her late 60s, she showed no signs of aging and moved swiftly, yet never gave the impression of being busy. She had just the right amount of elegance, making her the perfect fit for a high-end hotel manager. She also paid great attention to detail. When I stayed here before, that manager took great care of me, and I grew to love this hotel. I had recently heard that the hotel manager had changed. Since this was my first stay since the change in management, I was looking forward to seeing what kind of person the new manager would be. They might be as swift as the previous manager, or perhaps a laid-back and wonderful person. There's also a possibility that they excel in their insight when it comes to reading guests. If that's the case, they might realize that I'm not just an ordinary guest. With these thoughts in mind, I entered the hotel, feeling a bit nervous. "Welcome. Do you have a reservation?" A woman who seemed to be the manager called out to me as soon as I stepped inside. The woman appeared to be around the same age as me, wearing a beautiful suit and having a lovely appearance. Amidst her vibrant presence, there was a sense of refinement. And from my impression, she seemed to be a kind person. I answered the woman's question. "Yes, I have a reservation under the name Smith. I'm here to check in." As she checked the guest list, the woman spoke to me with a friendly smile. "We've been expecting you, Ms. Smith. Let me assist you with the check-in process. Are you here for sightseeing?" She asked me with a smile. Actually, I work for Smith Group and was aware of this hotel. The last time I stayed here, the previous manager took great care of me. I said a little shyly, and I felt like the woman's eyebrow slightly raised. "What?" I felt as if the woman's face had suddenly changed from the cheerful expression just now, and I couldn't help but let out a sound. The woman looked puzzled at my words, but the next moment, she was smiling again. "I see. I'm Susan, the new manager of the Miller Hotel. Ms. Smith, please enjoy your stay with us," Susan said politely, giving a courteous greeting. I must have imagined Susan's eyebrow raising for a moment. After all, there's no way the manager of such a high-end hotel would show their emotions over trivial matters. Feeling reassured, I nodded to Susan. "Yes. Thank you very much." With that, I followed an employee called by Susan to my assigned room. Wow! What a lovely room! The room I was guided to by the employee had a wonderful interior. The outside view was somewhat obscured by trees, but apart from that, it seemed to be an excellent room. As expected, the room was clean and had the luxurious feel that comes with a high-end hotel. The room I stayed in previously also had a lovely outside view. It overlooked the hot spring town, and I could gaze at the beautiful night scenery. However, even for rooms of the same grade, there can be hits and misses, so I can't complain. I put down my luggage and took a moment to catch my breath. Even though it's just a one-night stay, I'm so happy to be staying at such a hotel. While it's part of my job, I want to enjoy this high-end hotel since I'm here. The new manager also seemed like a proper person, which is good. And since she appeared to be around the same age as me, there likely won't be another management change for a while. She has the same last name as the previous manager, so she might be the previous manager's daughter. If that's the case, there's a high possibility that her management style will be similar to the previous manager, and I can probably trust her. This assignment seems like it won't be too difficult for me. I thought I could relax, but I would soon realize that wasn't the case. After taking a dip in the Miller Hotel's renowned bathroom and settling down, it was already 7 p.m. It was the long-awaited dinner time. This hotel offers course-style room service. The staff brings the dishes one after another. From appetizers to desserts, everything is refined and a pleasure to look at. Even for the main course's luxurious steak, the staff lights the fuel and checks the doneness, providing attentive service. Just by absent-mindedly watching, the finest cuisine is prepared. The timing of the next dish's arrival is also perfect, allowing me to fully enjoy the dining experience. Of course, being a high-end hotel, they use an abundance of high-quality ingredients, and the taste is impeccable. I had set my dinner time for 7 p.m., so the staff should be bringing the meal to my room soon. At the Miller Hotel, the course dishes are prepared using seasonal ingredients and local ingredients harvested near the hotel that day. Therefore, you don't know what kind of dishes you'll be eating until the last moment. It's understandable that many people stay at the Miller Hotel every month just for the cuisine. I wonder when it'll come. I waited in anticipation of the meal. 30 minutes passed. There was still no sign of the meal being delivered. The surrounding rooms seemed to have already started their dinner, as I could hear lively voices. I waited with my chin resting on my hand, anticipating a knock on the door at any moment. However, there was no sign of anyone knocking. It's late. I wonder if they're busy. The scheduled reservation time had long passed. This was taking too long, no matter how you looked at it. Thinking that I might have gotten the reservation time wrong, I checked the confirmation email. But even after checking, it was definitely set for 7 p.m. I should probably go to the front desk and check, after all. Losing my patience, I decided to leave the room and head to the front desk. Just then, I ran into an employee who seemed to be serving dinner to a nearby room. I promptly called out to the employee. Excuse me. I haven't received my dinner even though it's past the scheduled reservation time. The employee responded in a flustered manner. We sincerely apologize. I'll check on it right away, so could you please provide me with your room number? It's room 302. I answered hesitantly. The employee then took out a sheet of paper with the guests' dinner start times and checked it. However, as they looked at the paper, they began to tilt their head in confusion. Is something wrong? I asked, feeling uneasy about the employee's behavior. The employee then said something astonishing. That's strange. It shows that the reservation for room 302 has been cancelled. I heard it from the manager just a while ago, so I don't think there's a mistake. What? I was puzzled by the employee's statement. I had spoken with Susan at the reception, but she never mentioned anything about canceling dinner. At that time, Susan even asked, Your dinner is still scheduled for 7 p.m., correct? No changes? So I had confirmed it with her. As the employee and I stood there perplexed, Susan appeared out of nowhere. She then looked at the employee. "What are you doing here? If you don't hurry, it will interfere with serving dinner to the guests." As Susan said that to the employee hurriedly responded, "I apologize. Please excuse me," and immediately left the scene. This left Susan and me alone. Susan looked at me and let out a deep sigh. "Ms. Smith, our employees are busy, so could you please refrain from calling them over unnecessarily? It's quite troublesome," Susan said, placing a hand on her cheek and making a troubled gesture. Despite being surprised by Susan's attitude, which seemed to assume I was at fault, I answered, "I only asked the employee earlier because my meal hasn't been delivered even after waiting for so long. More importantly, why was my dinner canceled without my consent? What's going on?" Susan's behavior was outrageous, no matter how you looked at it. As I glared at Susan, she let out a smile. "You said it was canceled at the reception, didn't you, Ms. Smith?" "We simply followed your instructions," Susan said, looking at me with a provocative gaze. "I never said anything about canceling," I told her in a sharp tone. But Susan didn't back down. "Even for room service, our meals require a certain dress code. That's how high class our establishment is. For someone like you, Ms. Smith, with such a plain and common attire, it's a bit." Susan looked me up and down, as if licking my clothes with her eyes, and laughed. My face turned bright red at Susan's remark. She definitely canceled my meal on purpose. Being treated like this, I finally realized Susan's malicious intent. I couldn't let this slide. "I never said anything like that. And if it's about my clothes, I can change into something more appropriate, right? Anyway, please prepare my meal immediately," I told Susan. However, Susan said with a nasty grin, "The cancellation has already been processed, so we can't make changes at this point. There's another room service available, so why don't you try that? I'm not sure if you can afford it though, Ms. Smith, since it's quite expensive. Now, if you'll excuse me." As I stood there dumbfounded, Susan added as if remembering something, "Oh, and you've also canceled your breakfast, right, Ms. Smith? I'm telling you in advance, so don't you dare try to bother our employees tomorrow morning." With that, Susan promptly left the scene. "That manager pisses me off. What the hell is her problem?" I felt irritated by Susan's attitude, which was unacceptable for a manager and someone in the service industry. The nerve of her to cancel without my consent and then have that attitude. It was the worst service I've ever experienced at a hotel. In the end, I had to go to a nearby grocery store to get my dinner that day. "I feel terrible," I muttered, with dark circles under my eyes. After eating a sandwich from the grocery store for dinner and getting into bed, it was still the worst. The phone kept ringing from the front desk. When I answered, it was Susan's voice, laughing as she spoke to me. The content of her calls was utterly ridiculous. "We've received complaints from other rooms that your room is being noisy, Ms. Smith. Could you please keep it down?" I was asleep until the phone rang, and my room was completely silent. Therefore, there was no way there could be complaints about noise. "I'm sleeping quietly, so I think it must be a different room. Excuse me," I said and hung up the phone, but 10 minutes later, I received another call with the same content. I tried to ignore it, but the sound of the phone was so loud that I couldn't sleep. The phone ringing might also lead to new complaints. I had no choice but to answer the phone each time and deal with it. Thanks to that, I barely got any sleep and was completely sleep deprived. I felt absolutely terrible. I'm never staying at this hotel again, and I don't want to stay here any longer. I'm sure Susan already canceled my breakfast without my permission, and I don't think there's anything else for me to do at this hotel anyway. I decided to pack my bags immediately and check out. When I went to the front desk, Susan was standing there alone. The other employees were probably busy preparing breakfast. Originally, breakfast was supposed to be room service as well. In the hallway, I could see employees carrying delicious-looking dishes. Not being able to eat such wonderful food, I thought Susan had done something truly despicable. Honestly, I didn't want to see Susan, but since I stayed here, I had to settle the bill. With no other choice, I called out to Susan. "I'd like to check out, please." "Oh, you're leaving early. All the other guests are about to have breakfast now," Susan deliberately said that with a nasty grin on her face. I silently glared at Susan. It was entirely Susan's fault that I couldn't eat that breakfast. However, Susan didn't seem to care about my glare and started the checkout process in a good mood. I'm never coming back to the Miller Hotel again. After checking out, I plan to have breakfast somewhere else. Then, the next moment, Susan started saying something outrageous. "The bill comes to $3,000. If you can't pay, you might as well call your dad." "What? The bill is $3,000? What do you mean?" I couldn't help but ask Susan. I'm pretty sure when I booked the room, it was supposed to be $1,000 including meals. In the end, I didn't even get dinner, and my breakfast was cancelled without my consent. If it was just the room, it should have been at least $300 cheaper. I couldn't believe the price had tripled from the reservation amount. Susan then answered with a nasty grin. "Our hotel has a policy of charging double the room rate as a nuisance fee for guests who have caused trouble. Did you read the rules carefully, Ms. Smith? You were causing a disturbance with noise all night yesterday, right? So this is the natural amount." I was furious at Susan's outrageous statement. I was sleep-deprived and irritated because of Susan, so why was she making such provocative remarks? I argued back at Susan. "As I told you on the phone, I wasn't being noisy at all. And you canceled my breakfast and dinner without my permission, didn't you? Shouldn't you at least deduct that amount from the bill?" I said something perfectly reasonable, but Susan made an annoyed face. Susan really did nothing but irritate me. "Since you canceled it, it's only natural to include it in the fee. If you keep making a fuss, I'll call the police. With you working for Smith Group, this could get you fired, you know?" Susan said with a laugh. It's unbelievable how she can be the manager of a high-end hotel with that attitude. I clenched my teeth in frustration. I didn't want to let Susan have her way like this. I vowed to fight back. And I told Susan this. "This could turn into a serious problem, you know?" Even so, Susan didn't drop her arrogant attitude. "A serious problem? That's why poor people are so pretentious. I bet your dad is just as poor, isn't he? Are you planning to apologize and beg for forgiveness alongside your dad? You and your father are truly shameless." Susan repeated her malicious remarks with a loud laugh. "Don't just assume I'm poor," I calmly responded to Susan's statement. Susan could only act this way for now. My father already knew about yesterday's events, because I had just told him everything over the phone. My father was outraged when he heard my story. "Saying such things to Emily. I'll never forgive her." I felt proud of my father for getting angry on my behalf like that. And I had already called my father to come pick me up by car. He would probably arrive in about 5 minutes. While waiting for my father, Susan kept making condescending remarks toward me. "Why don't you just apologize and say you're sorry already? If you do, I might even let you pay in installments." "Well, the interest will be high though." "I'm not paying such an overcharged amount." I refused. But Susan didn't care about my refusal at all. "Well, even installments might be tough for a poor person. It's so sad to be in debt hell." she blathered on. She still seemed to want to look down on me as a poor person. Her personality was truly awful. I continued to ignore Susan's behavior. 5 minutes later, when my father arrived, Susan's demeanor changed. "Dad!" I ran up to my father with a smile. Susan looked at my father's face with a dumbfounded expression. She must have realized who my father was. "That person is..." Her previously confident expression transformed in an instant. Her eyes were clearly shaken. Susan's face turned pale and began to tremble. I laughed. "Do you know my dad? He's the chairman of Smith Group," I told Susan with a smile. Susan greeted my father while trembling. "I'm always truly indebted to the chairman." "So Miss Smith was the chairman's daughter. What a wonderful daughter you have." Susan said that with a smile, but her smile was clearly strained. And she was completely flustered. Susan's remarks were obviously just flattery, and it was clear as day that she was shaken up. I coldly told Susan, "You're quite an amusing manager. Just a moment ago, you were making remarks that looked down on me as a poor person. Wasn't it something like, apologize and beg for forgiveness alongside your dad?" When I asked that, Susan pretended not to know while breaking out in a cold sweat. "I never said such a thing. Excuse me, but aren't you misunderstanding something?" Susan said, glancing up at my father to gauge his reaction. "Emily seems to like jokes. I've been striving to provide the best hospitality all along." I took out my smartphone. "Actually, I recorded our earlier conversation. Would you like to hear it?" Yesterday, I had received terrible treatment from Susan. Thinking that Susan might pull something again during checkout, I had recorded our conversation on my smartphone just in case. And just as I had predicted, Susan made some outrageous remarks. It pays to be prepared. When I said that, Susan glared at me. "You sneaky little..." she muttered in a voice low enough that my father couldn't hear. It seemed that Susan wasn't reflecting on her actions at all, even in this situation. I really had to question her integrity as a person. Therefore, I didn't care what kind of situation Susan ended up in after this. I explained to my father what had just happened. About how Susan had demanded $3,000 from me and proposed a high-interest installment plan. Of course, I also told him how she had looked down on him as well. While I was talking to my father, Susan's face turned pale, and she said, "Stop! Don't say anything more!" But I ignored her. By the time I finished talking, my father's face had turned bright red, and he was even angrier. That's just how my father is, doting on his daughter. Of course he would be furious. And my father told Susan in a firm tone, "Let's cancel the talk about providing funds to the Miller Hotel. Please, anything but that." Susan looked like she was about to cry as she tried to cling to my father. And for good reason. In fact, the Miller Hotel's business had been deteriorating, and they were starting to have difficulties with cash flow. The Miller Hotel had originally prided itself on being a high-end establishment, but recently, the quality of their service had declined. That was most likely Susan's fault as well. It was obvious from her attitude during these past 2 days. Susan was friendly to guests who seemed wealthy or were male. However, her attitude clearly changed towards guests who were more down-to-earth or praised the previous manager. She might not have been as blatant as she was with me, but it was still at a level that guests would notice. Smith Group's main business was in the travel industry, but they also provided funding to hotels that they partnered with mainly for package tours. It was also a support project to help boost hotels even just a little. The Miller Hotel had been taken care of by the previous manager, so when we heard about their recent poor performance, there was talk of providing them with funds. The Miller Hotel was also popular for package tours. It would be a shame for such a hotel to disappear due to financial difficulties. That's what my father and the upper management of Smith Group thought. Susan kept glaring at me the whole time. She probably resented me, thinking that the talk of funding would fall through because of me. But the reality was completely different. I opened my mouth to speak to Susan. The real reason I stayed at the Miller Hotel this time was for the manager. You, Susan. Susan raised her eyebrows at that. Gone was any trace of the refined atmosphere of a high-end hotel manager. Her hair was a bit disheveled, and there were stains on her suit. If the previous manager had seen her like this, she would have screamed. "What do you mean?" Susan made a face as if she didn't understand what I meant. Certainly, if I suddenly told her that the purpose of my stay was for her, she would be confused. I gave Susan a brief explanation. I've been secretly conducting background checks on the hotels we provide funding to. Of course, it's under the instructions of Smith Group and as part of my job. We can't bring ourselves to help a hotel that would waste the funds we provide. What? Susan flinched when she heard my words. The manager of the Miller Hotel had just recently changed to Susan. Therefore, we didn't know what kind of person Susan was. If she was a strict person like the previous manager, there would be no problem. But if she was someone not worthy of boosting the Miller Hotel, there was a high possibility that providing funds would be a waste. In exchange for providing funds, Smith Group negotiates discounted accommodation rates for package plans. Securing a certain number of rooms during peak seasons was also part of the conditions for providing funds. This is to recover the amount of funds provided in the long run. In fact, we have steadily been able to recoup the money from the hotels we have funded so far. We're not a charity, so if we can't continue doing business with a hotel after providing funds, it would be a problem. That's why someone like me from Smith Group conducts an internal investigation of the hotel before providing funds. When I gave this explanation, Susan started trembling. "What's wrong?" I asked unintentionally as Susan clenched her fists and shook. Then she glared at me and said, "If you had told me beforehand, I wouldn't have acted like this. Doing this without saying anything is quite underhanded, don't you think?" Susan looked at me with accusing eyes. I was taken aback by Susan's remark. Susan was treating me like the bad guy. I couldn't understand why Susan was playing the victim in this situation. I said in exasperation, "There's no point in telling the manager, right? I want to see how the manager normally acts." Still, Susan wasn't convinced. "But..." She was trying to argue with me somehow. She must be desperate because it was a critical moment for whether or not they would receive funding. I let out a big sigh and said, "Besides, I told you from the beginning that I was an employee of Smith Group. If there's talk of funding, shouldn't you have been more careful then?" Normally, if an employee from a company that's considering providing funds stays at a hotel, they should be a bit more cautious. Even if not giving special treatment, I think they would be a bit more polite. They wouldn't interact with such a high-handed attitude. Then Susan muttered in frustration. I was annoyed that someone around my age could stay at a luxury hotel like this. And on top of that, you work for a big company like Smith Group. I can't even afford luxuries because our business is struggling. Susan said that and looked at me with a resentful expression. I was so appalled that I couldn't say anything. I never imagined that she would do such things for that reason. I composed myself and then spoke. "Even so, does that make it okay to charge unreasonable amounts and cancel meals without permission?" Then Susan snapped back. "I was going to serve you the meal if you apologized while crying. You're the one who hurt my pride. Isn't that natural?" "That's unacceptable for someone in the service industry," I muttered unintentionally. My father must have felt the same way, as he let out a big sigh. Anyway, the talk of funding is off the table. This is final. If you have any complaints, please take them to Smith Group's point of contact. Then Susan said with a face that looked like she was about to cry. No way! What will happen to this hotel without funding from Smith Group? Susan desperately clung to my father, trying to get him to provide the funds. Please, just provide the funding. I'll even make your daughter's accommodation free this time as a special offer. I'll include discount coupons too. But my father only shook his head. I quietly told Susan, it was a good thing that it happened to be me this time, but if you did that to a regular guest, it would lead to credibility issues. You're unfit to be a manager. No way! At that moment, Susan collapsed to her knees. Tears were overflowing from her eyes. Susan's time as a manager was probably over. She had gone this far with me, someone associated with Smith Group, a business partner. No matter how much she regretted it, we would never provide funds to the Miller Hotel with Susan there. I paid the regular rate and left the hotel with my father. After that, Susan ended up leaving the Miller Hotel. In fact, after what happened, my father had contacted the previous manager. And the previous manager immediately scolded Susan and ordered her dismissal. The previous manager was Susan's mother, and she was currently working behind the scenes in accounting and other areas. As the previous manager, she had appointed Susan as the manager of the Miller Hotel, wanting her eldest daughter to take over. However, while Susan acted like a good girl in front of the previous manager, she actually had a selfish side. Without the previous manager finding out, she had apparently forced employees she didn't like to quit one after another. This was revealed through an internal report from other employees when Susan's dismissal was decided. Until now, everyone couldn't say anything because she was the previous manager's daughter. But that was over now. Complaints about Susan were apparently piling up one after another. At this point, even the previous manager couldn't ignore it. Susan was not only fired but also reportedly kicked out of her family home. Susan had lost both her job and a place to live. She had treated others as if they were poor, but it had come right back to her. Moreover, Susan had done terrible things not just to me, but to others as well. I believe it's a case of what goes around, comes around. Sometime later, there were eyewitness reports of Susan being spotted in the red light district. Apparently, her clothes were filthy, and she was in a pitiful state. Among the current employees at the Miller Hotel, there were those who held a grudge against Susan. Such people were probably spreading Susan's misfortune in an amusing way. In any case, it's no longer any of my business. I don't care what happens to Susan. 6 months have passed since then. I'm still working at Smith Group, as always. The only thing that has changed is that I've been promoted to a leader position. Ostensibly, I work in sales, and my colleagues don't know about my duties in conducting internal hotel investigations. And it's been decided that my father will not be involved in my promotion. In other words, this promotion is entirely based on my own abilities. That genuinely makes me happy. I think I will face hardships in my work going forward. But I intend to keep doing my best without getting discouraged. And someday, I want to become someone who can lead Smith Group, just like my father. That's my plan for now. Electric bill, $1,100? I was shocked by the sudden spike in our electric bill. It had never even reached half this amount before. When I discussed it with my husband, Oswald, he thought for a moment before making a suggestion. Maybe we should try turning off the breaker at night. We hardly use any electricity at night anyway. I wondered if this would really save us any money. Nevertheless, I followed Oswald's advice and started turning off the breaker at night. Then, one day, things finally changed. As usual, after turning off the breaker and going to bed, my smartphone suddenly started ringing. Struggling in the dark, I finally managed to grab my smartphone and saw a barrage of missed calls from my daughter-in-law, Stephanie. Why would Stephanie call? As I held it, the smartphone vibrated again. I answered the phone immediately. Hello? Michelle? Enough is enough. What's going on? Stephanie was incredibly upset, not giving me a chance to speak. Later, I wondered, why did Stephanie put herself in such an unfavorable situation? My name is Michelle. I'm a 70-year-old housewife. Oswald is my age, a hard-working employee at a major company. Now retired, thanks to Oswald's efforts, we can live comfortably without any inconvenience. I'm nothing but grateful. Our eldest son, Lucas, and our second son, Cooper, moved away for jobs, but Oswald and I have been living happily together. I always thought our peaceful days with gentle Oswald would continue forever. Then suddenly, we got a call from Lucas. He was being transferred to work in this area. It's a great opportunity to live near home, he said. He hadn't shown much concern for us before, so this sudden interest was surprising. When I asked, Lucas proudly said, I'm 36 now, Mom. You and Dad are 70, right? I haven't shown you my kids. I thought it'd be a form of filial piety to live nearby. That's unnecessary, I said. Despite my words, I couldn't help but smile, touched by Lucas's thoughtfulness. Then, I remembered that a new condominium had been built nearby. If I recall correctly, there were still vacancies, looking for occupants. After I mentioned this, Lucas, pleased, said, A new build is a sure bet. We'll go for that. But we should check with Stephanie first. Living right next to the in-laws might not sit well with her, right? Stephanie seemed like the type who could handle herself well. Since quitting her job upon getting married, she had switched to working from home, earning a part-time income. Our relationship had been good, possibly because we hadn't seen each other much. Most daughters-in-law would dislike the idea of moving next to their in-laws. However, Lucas's response was unexpected. Actually, it was Stephanie who suggested it. When the transfer was decided, she proposed living near home. This surprised and pleased me. Honestly, I thought Stephanie and I didn't get along well. I'm laid back, which some might find annoyingly slow. Stephanie, efficient and the opposite type. And I have always tried not to be overbearing or sarcastic as a mother-in-law, though I worried she didn't think well of me. Lucas's suggestion blew away those concerns. That's great. Discuss it with Stephanie and let me know what you decide. Will do. Eventually, the eldest son and his wife did a walkthrough of the condo, and it seemed Stephanie agreed, as they moved in the next month. Moving is tough. How about joining us for dinner? Oswald and I planned to help with the move, but being elderly and with movers around, our son and daughter-in-law declined. Instead, I thought offering dinner might be a way to help, so I approached them after the movers left. That sounds great. Lucas was enthusiastic, unlike Stephanie, who seemed a bit down. Maybe suggesting dinner with the in-laws was too much right after moving. I might have overstepped. I quickly added, Sorry, you must be tired. Maybe we should plan it for another time. Lucas, all set to go out, made a face. Come on, let's go. It's a special occasion and I'm already hungry. Hey, Lucas. Remember to consider Stephanie's feelings too. As I was about to say this, Stephanie looked at me. I want to eat sushi. Is that okay? What? I was taken aback for a moment, but then I answered with a smile. Yes, of course. Then, I'll take you up on that offer. Stephanie took out her smartphone and started making a reservation at the restaurant. I've been wanting to try this sushi place I saw on social media. It seemed a bit pricey, so this is perfect. Stephanie cheerfully told Lucas. Was she implying that it was better to go on someone else's dime because it was expensive? Though it was a housewarming gift and money wasn't an issue, I felt conflicted. However, I couldn't voice these thoughts, and we all got into Lucas's car. Oswald sitting next to me had a complicated look on his face too. Delicious. I'm glad. Eat as much as you like. It was our first time at this sushi restaurant, but the taste was exceptional, and it was a good choice. Both Oswald and I were satisfied, and the eldest son and his wife kept eating more and more. Pricey, but worth it. I couldn't come here on my own dime. We should come again. Stephanie glanced at us as she stuffed herself with tuna. It was nice to see her enjoying the food, and I didn't mind bringing them again. However, the look in her eyes and the way she spoke somehow didn't sit well with me. Of course, we paid the bill in full. The eldest son and his wife, having filled their stomachs, didn't even say thank you. Just stuffed. Ate too much. They laughed. For a few days afterward, we didn't see the eldest son and his wife, nor did we communicate much. I started to worry, but no news is good news. Oswald reassured me. Then, one day, a month after the eldest son and his wife moved in, they came to visit. Finished work early. Let's go out for dinner. We're off tomorrow. Oh, that sounds nice. I haven't started cooking yet. Where shall we go? As we were thinking of a place, Stephanie, like before, held out her smartphone. Let's go here. She pointed to a barbecue restaurant about an hour's drive away. It was a bit of a distance. Spending 2 hours just for a meal seemed excessive. Isn't that a bit far? I tried to decline gently, but Stephanie wouldn't have it. I've been wanting to go there too. Lucas will drive. You just have to sit back. So it's fine, right? Overwhelmed by her insistence, we agreed. The outing unfolded just like the sushi restaurant visit. The eldest son and his wife ordered to their heart's content and ate voraciously. Due to our age, Oswald and I couldn't eat much barbecue. By the time we ate and returned home, it was past 9 p.m. Usually, we'd be preparing for bed at this time. I wanted to take a quick shower and lie down. After thanking Lucas for driving, well then, I headed towards the house. Surprisingly, the eldest son and his wife followed us. What's up? Need something? Stephanie's interested in our garden, Lucas explained. There's a separate building, right? I heard from Lucas yesterday. I thought I'd take a look for future reference. Indeed, our home has a separate building in the garden. But now, it's mostly used as a storage shed and barely utilized. I wondered why they suddenly took an interest. The eldest son and his wife walked into the garden. Reluctantly, I showed them around briefly. It's dark, and we're tired. So I sent them home early. The eldest son and his wife left without further fuss. They've been to our house many times before, so this sudden interest puzzled me. I had questions about their behavior, but the need for sleep prevailed, and I rushed to the shower room, stopping my ponderings. My eldest son and his wife continued to invite us out to eat regularly. While the gesture was appreciated every time, the restaurant was Stephanie's choice, slightly pricier than usual. And of course, we always footed the bill. It might seem stingy, but gradually, I became less enthusiastic about dining out with the eldest son and his wife. They weren't there to enjoy a leisurely meal and conversation, they just ate until they were full. though they had suggested stopping by our place after the barbecue restaurant outing. They hadn't shown any interest in coming over since then. It felt as if we were just there to provide them with money for their meals. Even Oswald, who is usually generous with money, had a bitter expression. I wish they would at least say thank you. Right. Not even a word of thanks. It's not enjoyable to eat out feeling this way. I decided to decline the next time we were invited. Perhaps they sensed my feelings because the invitations from the eldest son and his wife suddenly stopped. I felt a bit relieved, but then one day, about a month later, while updating the household budget, I was startled. What's this? It's easy to see why our dining out expenses were up last month. We had many meals out with our eldest son and his wife, so it's not hard to imagine. The problem lay in a completely unrelated category. The electricity bill is $1,100? Our home is all electric, and it's winter now. Given that this year has been colder than usual, I understand that heating costs would be higher. But this increase is just too much. Even at its highest, it's never been more than $300. And now it's suddenly $1,100. It makes me wonder if electricity can leak somewhere, like a burst water pipe can cause a leak. When I brought this up with Oswald, he seemed to ponder for a moment. Should we talk to the electric company? But I'd feel terrible if it turns out to just be us using too much. I was perplexed, but Oswald seemed unusually calm. Then, with a smile, he suggested something. Maybe we should just turn off the breaker at night. Just at night? I wondered if it was meant to save money. But doing something like that seemed inconvenient and unlikely to significantly lower our suddenly spiked electric bill. However, knowing Oswald, there must be a reason behind it. After decades together, if he thinks it's worth a try, then it probably is. All right, let's give it a shot. At my words, Oswald nodded with a smile. We usually bundle up and don't use the heating. When we sleep to avoid waking up to a dried-out atmosphere from the air conditioning. So, while the idea seemed inconvenient at first, upon reconsideration, it didn't seem like it would be too troublesome after all. The only issue might be if I need to use the bathroom in the middle of the night. What do we do then? Use a flashlight? It'll probably be fine. It won't take that long. Oswald looked somewhat sad for some reason. Turning off the breaker seemed like too simple a solution for whatever problem we were facing. Despite my questions, Oswald didn't provide an answer. And so, from that night on, Oswald and I decided to turn off the breaker once we were ready for bed. The room was silent and pitch black. It felt a bit strange since we usually sleep with a night light. I wonder what this will solve. I murmured quietly and closed my eyes. Morning came without incident. It was inconvenient, sure, but would something like this really resolve our issue? Though curious, we continued our routine of turning off the breaker each night. Then, one day, something changed. As usual, after turning off the breaker and getting into bed, I began to drift off to sleep. Just as I thought I might fall asleep, my smartphone suddenly started ringing loudly. Flashes of light reflected off the walls of the room. Who could be calling at this hour? I was surprised and confused, but the phone stopped ringing. Then it started again almost immediately. The smartphone was a bit away, and the room was completely dark. By the time I managed to find it, guided by its light, there were more than 10 missed calls. All of them were from Stephanie. Why would Stephanie call? As I picked it up, the phone vibrated again in my hand. I answered immediately. Hello? Michelle? Enough is enough. What's going on over there? Before I could even speak, Stephanie sounded very agitated. What do you mean? It's your electricity. It's been going out at night for the past few days, hasn't it? I talked to Lucas, and he said the condos aren't experiencing any outages. It's weird that only your house is losing power. Did you do something? Stephanie interrogated me rapidly, as if accusing us. Her claims were bizarre, especially since it was strange how she knew about our electricity usage. How do you know our electricity is going out? What? We've only used a night light during these hours before. There are curtains, so practically no light should be leaking outside. Unless someone was paying very close attention, they wouldn't notice our recent lack of electricity. And what do you mean you talked to Lucas? Aren't you at the condo? Where are you? There was no reply from the other end. Stephanie? Please turn the electricity back on quickly. Stephanie's voice was shaking as if she was disturbed by something. With that, the call was ended. What does that mean? I looked over at Oswald next to me, who was also on the phone with someone. Who are you calling? I asked, and he said he was calling Lucas. Then, Oswald called Lucas over. As soon as Lucas arrived, he was surprised by the darkness of our home. Greeting him at the entrance, only the street lights illuminated us. Why aren't the lights on? I tried to explain, but Oswald gestured for me to stop. More importantly, do you know where Stephanie is? What? Even in the dim light, it was clear that Lucas was unsettled. Lucas, talk to us. Seemingly resigned by Oswald's stern voice, Lucas began to speak in a soft voice. Actually, I had a fight with Stephanie a while back, and she hasn't come back home. They've been in contact through social media and phone calls, but haven't seen each other face to face. So where is Stephanie? She works from home, so she doesn't have many places to go during the day, right? Isn't she in trouble? It seems she took her computer with her, so she should be fine. Probably staying at a friend's house or something. Lucas seemed hesitant to ask for her exact location, fearing it would seem like admitting defeat. You two are married, and yet. I was exasperated when another call from Stephanie came in. As soon as I answered, her voice, louder than before, filled my ear. Is the electricity still not back? I can't stand it anymore. If you don't know what's causing it, you better call a professional or something. Why was she so fixated on our electricity? Even I could somewhat understand the answer to that by now. In other words, Stephanie would be in trouble without our electricity. Looking at Oswald, he slowly nodded. We went back to the bathroom where the breaker was, turned it back on, and quickly pressed the hallway light switch before heading back to the entrance, led by Oswald, to a certain location. It seemed the electricity was restored. Through the still connected phone, I could sense Stephanie's sigh of relief. Stephanie, are you by any chance near us right now? What? Like, for example, in a separate building. At that moment, I vigorously opened the door to the annex. The scene that greeted me as I opened the door was shocking. It was a completely different place from the annex I remembered. A respectable living space had been created by cleverly arranging shelves and tables in the cramped space. There was even a small refrigerator. And at the center of all this, Stephanie stood frozen, staring at us wide-eyed. Stephanie opened and closed her mouth, trying to say something but seemingly too shocked to speak. Lucas, with a similar expression, managed to speak up. Stephanie, why are you here? How long have you been here? Lucas, why are you here? Both of them asked questions but provided no answers to each other. In the awkward silence, only the loud noise of the air conditioner stood out. Hearing that noise, Oswald and I looked at each other and then back at the air conditioner. The sudden spike in our electricity bill was because of this. Seems like it. Looking around, We saw a humidifier, a kettle, and other electrical appliances that would likely increase the electricity bill. None of which were originally there. Presumably, Stephanie had brought them in. I was surprised that Oswald had noticed, and when I asked him how he knew, he gave a wry smile and explained. Stephanie was unusually interested in this place before. There were other reasons, but it's rare for the electricity bill to spike that much all at once, even if someone was stealing electricity from an external outlet. It seemed he thought it wouldn't be impossible if one lived without worrying about the electricity bill at all. In fact, Stephanie had been living in this annex. So the electricity going out was intentional? That's terrible. It was so cold, and I was in the middle of work. Stephanie. And to think you called Lucas over as well, you both are too sly. Stephanie. After calling her name more firmly, Stephanie slightly shook her shoulders and finally looked at us. The slight panic on her face indicated she knew she had done something wrong. I heard from Lucas just now that you two had been fighting. How long have you been staying here? About a month, I guess. That long? As Oswald and I looked on with disbelief, Stephanie's face turned a bit red, and she raised her voice. Maybe it was wrong of me to just move in without asking. But come on, we're family. Even if we're family, it's not okay for you to just barge in and live here without permission. If Lucas had just apologized sooner, none of this would have happened. When Stephanie said this looking at Lucas. What did you say? He glared back at her. I didn't want to live in such a cramped space, you know. Instead of apologizing, Stephanie became defiant, snorting and crossing her arms. Don't use your marital spat as an excuse. Anyway, you're going to have to take responsibility. Speaking sternly on purpose, Stephanie reacted with a slightly scared look. Responsibility? Yes. The electricity bill has skyrocketed because of you living here. You'll have to pay the difference. Stephanie burst out laughing. The electricity bill? Michelle, for someone who's well off, you're quite stingy, aren't you? Fine, I'll pay it. How much is it? The electricity bill was $1,100. Our usual bill for this time of year was $300. So, the difference was $800. $800. I said clearly, and Stephanie looked taken aback. You're kidding, right? The electricity bill? That can't be right. It's not a joke. Last month's bill was $1,100. The difference from our usual expense is $800. Stephanie glared at us with a sharp look, and then started saying something outrageous. You guys should pay me money. Why would we do that? Stephanie put forth her illogical reasoning. Because you intentionally turned off the breaker, my work was interrupted, you know? You have no idea how much trouble I've been in these past few days. That's no reason for us to pay you. How is that fair? Why should I be the only one to pay such a high amount? Despite having taken advantage of someone else's property without permission. Without a word of apology or any sign of remorse, Stephanie remained defiant. Oswald, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up to Stephanie. Paying for what you've used is only natural. Even a child understands that. Stephanie fell silent at Oswald's unusually stern tone. Then, Oswald, with a sigh, handed something over. Lucas, you really should have been more discerning about women. With a bit of sarcasm, he presented a few photographs. Looking at them, the color drained from Stephanie's face. This. Stephanie hurriedly tried to collect the photos, but it was too late. Lucas and I had already seen them clearly. The photos showed Stephanie cozily close to a young man. Stephanie! What is this? You accuse me of cheating, and now it turns out you've been cheating? It seemed this was the root of their argument. Stephanie's face contorted. Who is this guy? It's not like that. He's just a friend. Well, not really just a friend, but... The photos suggested a much closer relationship than just friends. Furthermore, it was clear from the background of the photos that their meetings took place in this annex. Oswald sighed deeply and explained to me. Apparently, Oswald had purposefully turned off the breaker at night for this reason. He had realized a while ago that Stephanie had been living here, and had already brought a man into the annex when he first noticed. He was planning to inform Lucas, but was struggling with how and when to present the evidence he had gathered. It was when the electricity bill suddenly spiked that I connected the dots. But why go through the indirect method of turning off the breaker at night? It was because Stephanie was always bringing men over at night. I certainly didn't want to barge in on them in the midst of an affair. Plus, Oswald looked coldly at Stephanie. I had hoped that Stephanie would reflect on her actions and come forward herself. By overtly turning off the breaker and making life inconvenient, he had hoped to push her back to Lucas. It was very much like Oswald. But I never imagined she'd brazenly call us. Did she not think it would backfire on her? Stephanie trembled with her head down, obviously not expecting everything to be revealed. Lucas, with his head in his hands, firmly told Stephanie, "Let's get a divorce." Stephanie looked up sharply. Why? It's obvious. How can I continue living with a woman who moved into my parents' house without permission and cheated on me? Wait a minute. Stephanie tried to cling to Lucas but was pushed away. Oswald glared at her sharply. Seeing no recourse, she turned to me, trying to win me over with a flattering tone. Michelle, you understand, right? As a woman, the feeling of being swayed by another man? When she tried to grab my shoulder, I quickly stepped back, and Stephanie, losing her balance, fell face first to the ground. Shaking with anger, I looked down at her. As a woman, I cannot understand someone as senseless as you. I am committed to Oswald alone. I don't want to be lumped in with someone as selfish as you. Such. Stephanie, seeming to have scraped her nose and cheek, uttered a choked sob. You'll have to make amends for moving in without permission and for cheating. Both to us and to Lucas. Under the glares of the three of us, Stephanie lay crying on the ground. Afterwards, Lucas and Stephanie got divorced. The man she cheated with was unemployed, so it was quite a struggle to get him to pay compensation. But Stephanie is likely facing much bigger struggles ahead. Although she works, her income is only part-time, and now she's burdened with debt from the compensation. Finding a new place to live is going to be tough. Lucas, too, showed signs of remorse. Later, he apologized and revealed a new fact. It was Stephanie's idea to move next to our house, saying, Lucas, your family is wealthy, so let's live near them and have a good time. Lucas had easily agreed to this and was the one proposing regular meals at our place. He promised that, while he may come over for meals in the future, he wouldn't ask for unnecessarily expensive things. Oswald and I reflected on not checking the annex more thoroughly. We hadn't even locked it, thinking it was secure within our property. We planned to regularly organize and utilize the space from now on. While Stephanie's actions were shocking, this incident has deepened the bond between Oswald and me. We hope to continue supporting each other as a couple. This time, give the baby to your brother. You can just have another one. After I announced my pregnancy to my parents, my mother uttered those unbelievable words. Brother Zach and his wife Rosie, who is infertile, demanded that I give up my child for adoption to them. My parents have always prioritized Zach over everything and neglected me. The hopeful future I had envisioned upon conceiving my first child turned into despair. My name is Olivia. I've been married to my husband Walt for 3 years. Our marriage is great, and we've been talking like we want a child soon. However, I've kept some distance from my family home. The reason lies with my parents and my brother Zach. At the family home, my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie live together. Zach was a prodigy since childhood and graduated from a prestigious university. He now secured a job at a major corporation. He is set to join and eventually take over our father's company. Our parents have adored him since he was young. In comparison, I wasn't very smart and had average looks, so I don't have many memories of being cherished by our parents. From a young age, I was always confused by the difference in treatment between Zach and me, often feeling down alone. Especially our mother, she was always with him, clearly showing he was her favorite. As for me, she mostly ignored me. When she did talk, it was usually to put me down. Perhaps influenced by our parents, Zach looked down on me too, so we never had a good sibling relationship. I felt I had no place at home and grew increasingly isolated. For those reasons, as soon as I graduated high school, I left home. My parents, seemingly uninterested in me, didn't say much when I announced my departure. In fact, they seemed almost pleased. After leaving, I got a job. And 3 years later, I married Walt, who was a classmate from high school. I was eager to build my own family and find my peace, away from the influence of my family. I only return home for Thanksgiving and Christmas. I'd rather not go, but my parents insist. They worry about appearances, and a daughter who never visits would look bad. They make a fuss if I don't go, so I endure it and visit twice a year. I went back grudgingly this Thanksgiving, but my mother was as cold as ever. You and your husband are still so unimpressive. It ruins the festive mood. She started with her sarcasm right away. She called us back only to say such things. If she's going to be like this, she shouldn't bother calling. I thought, while fending off her sarcasm, but her barbs continued. We're worried about you. You two live in poverty. We always think you'll come begging for money. My family home is quite wealthy. But since leaving, I've never asked for financial help and have been living off our own earnings with Walt. We manage a decent life and even celebrate their birthdays properly. There's no way we would do that. I immediately responded to her baseless accusation. However, she blurted out, "But you two are still low income, aren't you?" And then shifted her gaze to Walt beside me. Walt, you're still working at that detective agency, right? How long do you plan to keep doing that shady business? Don't you feel embarrassed? Indeed, Walt works as a detective, something she always ridicules. She sees detective work as shady and inferior to regular jobs. While Walt was explaining his job to make it understandable for her, Zach chimed in. Mom, it's pointless to even listen to that. Detective work is shady, something nobody wants to get involved in. It's a low-level job done by people beneath us. The salary must be nothing compared to mine. Flaunting his elitism, Zach looked down on detective work, just like her. That is something we've been hearing since we got married. Walt remained silent, but I felt angry that his job was being completely dismissed. Walt has been my confidant since our student days, so he understands what my family is like. Therefore, he always accompanies me when we have to visit my parents, not wanting to leave me alone. Even though he knows he'll be subjected to unpleasantness, I still feel terribly guilty. This visit, like others, ended up being an unpleasant experience. We resolved to live modestly together, not bothered by my family. Around that time, something wonderful happened. In our 3rd year of marriage, I finally became pregnant. I was overjoyed to be expecting our first child. Considering the way my parents always disparaged me, I felt I couldn't keep my pregnancy a secret from them. So, I visited my family home to announce it. It had been a while since I visited outside of Thanksgiving and Christmas, and my parents, Zach, and his wife Rosie were there. The response to my announcement was unexpected. Upon hearing my news, my mother suddenly raised her voice. How dare you say such a thing in front of Zach? I was surprised by her reaction. I hadn't expected congratulations, but this was unexpected. I was puzzled by her reference to Zach, and as I tilted my head in confusion, she revealed a shocking truth. Zach can't have children, due to Rosie's constitution. How could you be so insensitive with your announcement? I had no idea that they were infertile. Stunned by her unexpected words, I turned to look at the two. Zach looked uncomfortable and resigned. Meanwhile, Rosie was looking down solemnly. You dare have a child before Zach? If it weren't for Rosie, this wouldn't have happened. She sighed dramatically, glancing back and forth between Rosie and me. Observing that, Zach intervened. You know, Rosie feels guilty enough as it is. Don't be too hard on her, Mom. I was a bit surprised to hear he defend Rosie. From my occasional visits, I knew that his attitude towards Rosie was never that kind. You're really kind, Zach. Rosie, if it weren't for being Zach's wife, you'd have been divorced long ago. Hearing Zach's words, our mother glared at Rosie. Indeed, knowing them, they might have divorced Rosie immediately upon learning of her infertility. But perhaps Zach does have some affection for his wife. I pondered that as I watched he calm our mother down. Well, I've made my announcement, so I'll be heading home. The atmosphere had turned to blaming Rosie because of my announcement, so I decided to leave quickly. But then, my mother turned to me and said something unbelievable. The baby you're having, give it to Zach. What? I couldn't help but exclaim in shock at her outrageous suggestion. What does she mean, give my baby to Zach? You can have another child since you're capable of having one. Since Rosie seems unable to. So giving that baby to Zach as an adopted child will bring peace to our family. Peace? What is she talking about? How could they think of taking my baby for him, just because he can't have children? That's absurd and unjustifiable. When I insisted I would never agree to such a thing, my mother retorted, Look, this is our long-awaited first grandchild. I'll let it grow around me. It's only right that we get to raise it. Zach will take over the company, so we will raise the baby. She made such infuriating arguments, planning to take away my unborn child just to ensure a successor for our father's company. She talked about the process of adoption as if she had researched it, but I was too furious to listen. Seeing how irritated I was, Zach added something unbelievable. Well, since Rosie can't have children, it's good for her that you got pregnant at this time. At least you're finally contributing to this family. I couldn't believe it, but Zach seemed to agree with her. Even our father, who usually says nothing, nodded in agreement from behind them. It seemed the whole family was ready to claim my baby as their own. I couldn't believe how casually Zach spoke such terrible words to his own wife, acting as if nothing was wrong. Realizing that talking further was pointless, I decided to leave immediately. They only said, make sure to give us an answer next time you come. And didn't even come out to see me off. Only Rosie, who must have been deeply hurt, silently saw me off. Even after returning home, my anger didn't subside. Far from celebrating my pregnancy, they made an unreasonable and absurd demand. Thinking about the future made me feel gloomy. They would probably keep pushing for adoption after the baby was born. Walt was also shocked when he heard the story from me after returning from work. Even he was at a loss for words. He understands my family, but the situation being beyond belief. A few days later, we had an unexpected visitor at home. What brings you here so suddenly? It's rare to see you alone. It was Rosie. She looked haggard, her skin lacked luster, and her hair was disheveled. As she looked at us, her eyes brimmed with tears. Olivia, I'm so sorry about the other day. She must be referring to when I went to announce my pregnancy. It wasn't her fault though. She seemed to feel guilty about the unreasonable demands made by my family. Then, she began to speak about something unexpected. Actually, I have something I want to talk to you about. What could it be? I invited her in to hear her out. What she revealed was shocking, and my anger surged again. Trying hard to suppress her anger, she calmly told me a significant truth. Walt had been quietly listening to our conversation, but spoke up as our talk wound down, saying, actually, and revealed information to me. It was as astonishing and infuriating as Rosie's confession. Although Rosie had been listening to Walt's story, her teared up again. Having been informed of this significant fact by Walt and Rosie, I made a decision. to punish my parents and Zach. I swore to myself to settle past grievances and seek revenge. 3 months later, my belly beginning to show, I visited my family home with Walt. There were my parents, Zach, and Rosie. "You've decided to give the baby to Zach, right?" My mother asked, without even a greeting. It seemed she could only think of my baby being adopted by Zach. "I told you before, that's not going to happen." As I responded, my parents glared at me, as if they couldn't accept it. "No matter what you say, we're taking that baby. Stop being so stubborn." My mother appeared infuriated by my resistance. Feeling the same way, Zach and my father just glared at me without stopping her. "No matter how much you yell, I will never give the baby away. Instead, I came today to show something to you guys. Is that okay, Rosie?" I said, then made eye contact with Rosie. She nodded, still looking into my eyes. "Rosie intends to divorce Zach. And the reason is this." I pulled several photos from an envelope I had brought. That was my purpose for coming today. "These are..." Seeing the photos, Zach was speechless. The photos showed Zach kissing another woman and entering a hotel, undeniable evidence of his infidelity. Apparently shocked to have been photographed, he muttered just one sentence. "Who the hell took these photos?" Our parents, standing next to Zach, looked bewildered and alternated their gaze between him and me. They probably had no idea that he was having an affair. "It was Walt who took these." "What?" Yes, Walt had taken the photos. Walt had been silently watching that unfold, but began to explain how he came to take the photos. As a detective, he had incidentally seen Zach walking in downtown with an unknown woman while investigating a case. Out of curiosity, he conducted his own investigation and discovered that Zach was having an affair with that woman by pretending to be single. The decisive moment was captured in those photos. Zach seemed to think he had cleverly kept his affair secret. He was dumbfounded and at a loss for words. "Adultery is a valid reason for divorce. Make sure you pay Rosie a proper compensation." Amidst the tense atmosphere, Zach spoke. "I got stuck with a wife who's so incompetent. It's okay to have a little fun outside, right?" Rosie and I were speechless. Instead of apologizing, he blamed Rosie for his infidelity. "That's right, you're right. Rosie, it's because you're incompetent. To think you're acting all high and mighty about divorce." Our mother joined in, supporting his retort. They were desperately trying to blame Rosie, probably not wanting to be at a disadvantage themselves. I guess after I left, she must have been treated coldly by this family, just like I was. Thinking about it made me feel terribly sorry for her. Therefore, I decided to confront this family today. To save myself and Rosie, who had been neglected all that time, I pushed them further into a corner by blaming Rosie. "Zach, you made fun of Walt, but the investigative skills of a professional detective are extraordinary. As soon as he started investigating, evidence kept piling up. And then, we found out something shocking about your mistress." Saying that, I saw my parents tensing up, wondering what shocking fact would come out next. "The woman you're having an affair with seems to be the daughter of a mafia boss." As soon as I revealed it, Zach stiffened as if frozen. He must not have known that. Immediately, my mother screamed. "What? Is that true?" Her beloved son's mistress being the daughter of a mafia boss. Upon knowing the full extent of the shocking truth, she collapsed to the ground, covering her face with both hands. My father also pressed his head with both hands, as if he had heard something terrifying. "Zach, you were pretending to be single while dating her, correct?" Right, he had hidden his marital status to have an affair with the woman. If she finds out that she's been deceived by a married man, what do you think will happen? What will her parents do when they learn their daughter was tricked by a married man? It would be better to tell them, right? With my threatening words, now clearly realizing the identity of the woman he had been deceiving, Zach started to panic. "No! I didn't know either. I was deceived too." Our parents, domineering just a moment ago, were now completely confused by this unforeseen revelation. Then, Rosie began to speak in front of the flustered. "You didn't just deceive your mistress, did you?" With her words, tension returned to the room. Then, she repeated what she had told me during her visit. "You are infertile, aren't you?" At that moment, Zach's face showed an "oh no" expression. Our parents looked at him in shock. They had blamed Rosie for not being able to have a baby, but the cause was actually Zach himself. "Did you know, Rosie?" That was all he could manage to say. The stunned parents were visibly shaken by the harsh impact. As they struggled to find their next words, Rosie delivered the final blow. "I found it accidentally while cleaning the room." Rosie had stumbled upon his infertility diagnosis, hidden in his desk drawer. He couldn't admit that to his doting parents, so he kept that fact a secret and blamed infertility on Rosie. Believing his words, our parents had blamed Rosie. His protective comments about Rosie when I announced my pregnancy were probably due to his guilt over the issue. Being blamed for not being able to have a baby, I suffered every day. And the talk turned to taking Olivia's child. I was just so sad. Rosie declared that with a calm and unchanged expression. In contrast, my parents had just learned the shocking truth and were in a panic. "To think Zach will never have a baby, that's just..." My mother was despairing at the reality of not being able to hold his child. But in the next moment, she turned her hysterical hatred towards him. "You knew it was your fault, yet you pushed all the blame onto your wife. Did you cheat with other women just because you knew you were infertile? How could my son be so low? Oh dear, why did this happen?" She vented her frustration at him. Hearing it, he finally spoke and started his pitiful explanation. "I was shocked to find out I was infertile. I felt guilty for not giving you two a grandchild. When I found out Olivia was pregnant with a boy, it just seemed convenient." It was a story that made me feel utterly contemptuous. Shaking off my anger, I delivered the final blow to the three. "Your selfish actions hurt Rosie and me. Besides, you have an affair with such a dangerous person. Zach, Mom, and Dad, you all better brace yourselves for what's coming. You guys have hurt so many people, now you'll get what you deserve." Hearing my words, they started apologizing to us, their earlier bravado gone. Where did the momentum go when you asked me to give up my son? I looked at the three of them with disdain, like looking at trash. Beside me, Rosie said nothing and just stared ahead. Her silence spoke volumes about the depth of her sorrow. Zach and my parents were in for tough times ahead. The father of Zach's mistress learned about the affair, and the three of them were summoned and had to apologize repeatedly. Although they managed to break off the affair, Zach was forced to pay a hefty compensation because he had deceived the woman. The amount was staggering, and they learned the hard way the dangers of entanglement with such people. Because of that, my family home soon fell into disarray. My father was forced to resign as company president due to the public scandal. My mother became isolated, seen with disdain by the neighbors, and withdrew into herself. The relationship between my parents became hostile, constantly arguing over Zach. Zach was forced to leave his job after the scandal leaked to his company. As if to add insult to injury, his divorce with Rosie was finalized. Losing his job and having to pay compensation to Rosie, Zach was trapped in a life of relentless work. Around the time Rosie successfully left the family home, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Both the baby and I were in good health, and I savored the joy of welcoming a new life. The happy days for our family of three began. Then, Walt and I decided to cut all ties with my family. I had been torn about severing ties with such parents and brother, but that incident made me realize it was best for my son. Even without them, I have an irreplaceable family now. I've decided to cherish only my precious family from now on. No employee by that name works here, I'm afraid. I realized my husband Cody left something behind when he went on a business trip, so I called his office and told his name. To my surprise, they said no such person worked there. What could this mean? Suspicious, I started rummaging through Cody's belongings in his room. Then, from his luggage, I found something shocking, something unbelievable. When I found this astonishing truth, I decided to revenge. My name is Rachel Thunderbolt. This year marks my 3rd year of marriage to Cody. Since I was the only daughter, Cody became an adopted son-in-law of the Thunderbolt family to carry on our name, and his last name became Thunderbolt too. He gladly accepted to take on my family's name. We had a blissful marriage, usually busy with our jobs, but we promised to have a baby someday. I could never have predicted our happy life would come to such a sudden end. It all started on the day Cody left for his business trip. While cleaning his room, I found a large envelope. It looked like important documents for his trip.
Oh no!
I tried calling Cody, but his cell phone was off and I couldn't reach him. Maybe he was on a plane or on Amtrak train, going through the tunnel. Thinking it urgent, I called his company next. Hello, this is Seven Forest Corporation.
I'm Cody Thunderbolt's wife. He forgot something important and I need to contact him right away.
Cody Thunderbolt. Please hold for a moment. The man on the phone, presumably Cody's colleague, sounded perplexed. Soon, the call was put on hold, and music began to play. After being on hold for about 3 minutes, the same man returned with an odd word. I'm sorry, but we don't have an employee named Cody Thunderbolt. Are you sure you have the right company?
What? But you are Seven Forest Corporation, right?
Yes, that's correct, but I was certain it was Cody's workplace. I double-checked the phone number, and it wasn't a common company name. Despite repeatedly confirming the company name and address, they kept insisting they had no employee by that name. All right, thank you. Sorry to bother you. I hung up the phone, utterly confused, but one thing was certain. Cody was lying about something. With a mix of confusion and a desire to find some clue, I searched his room again. And there, in his bag, I found an employee ID card for Seven Forest Corporation. It had his photo on it. He definitely worked there, no doubt about it. But the name written here. It said Cody Harris, a completely different last name. Confused and dizzy, I squatted down. I took a deep breath to calm my mind. Cody had a big secret. Convinced of this, I couldn't just sit still. I went straight to a private investigator to look into his background. Cody's business trip, if his words were right, was for a week. The investigator was skilled, and I got the report before Cody returned. But the content was shocking. To put it bluntly, Rachel Thunderbolt, you're single.
What? I don't understand what you mean.
Cody has another family.
Does that mean he's cheating on me?
Well, it's more like you're the other woman.
What?
According to the investigator, there was no marriage record between me and Cody. He had another family, with whom he was legally married, so they were his real wife and children. Was I not married? What does this mean? It was a shockingly unbelievable fact. After receiving the report from the investigator, I couldn't say anything, and rode the bus home, absent-minded.
We'll need quite a bit of money for a wedding, huh? I can't afford it right now, but one day we'll definitely have one. I'll work harder so we can also go on a honeymoon.
3 years ago, Cody said that with a refreshing smile and promised. It's okay if we don't have a wedding. I'm happy as is. I smiled and said that. His parents had passed away, leaving him all alone, so we only reported our marriage to my parents. Since I was the only daughter, he took the initiative to take on the Thunderbolt name. Of course, my parents were delighted with this. We signed the marriage application, but around that time, I got busy at work and couldn't find time to go to the city office with him. Rachel, you're busy, right? I'll submit it when the time is right. So, I entrusted him with the application, assuming he had submitted it. But in reality, he never did, and so Cody and I were just strangers. We both had different jobs and social insurance, and we kept our finances separate. So, something that should have been apparent from tax documents or something went completely unnoticed. Cody must have known and done it on purpose. I believed we were married and lived as such. Thinking about it made me feel a deep anger rising within me. A week passed, and it was the day Cody returned home. I left work early to wait for him.
Cody, we need to talk.
As soon as he entered the living room with the carry-on bag he used for his trip, I talked to him. "What?" "I have souvenirs, you know," he said nonchalantly. Seeing that just made me angrier. "Your real name is Cody Harris, isn't it?" What?" I confronted Cody with the employee ID card I found in his room, and he looked shaken for a moment. "Well, I just kept Harris as my name at work." "What are you talking about? When we met, you called yourself Cody Smith." "Did I? I don't remember." Cody tried to feign ignorance, but I presented him with the private investigator's report. "I went behind your back, sorry, but I had a private investigator look into you. You have another family, and I was just a fling, right?" He seemed taken aback by the evidence but quickly tried to regain composure with a smile. "It wasn't just a fling. I take everything seriously." "Don't give me that. You clearly said you'd submit our marriage application." "Did I say that? Then how come we're not married?" Why is that?" Cody kept making irresponsible words, trying to dodge my questioning. His careless attitude only made me more stressed. "You were the one who said, it's okay if we don't have a wedding. I'm happy as is." "That's different. This is a case of bigamy, a violation of the law." "That's fine. Since I never submitted the marriage application with you, it's not bigamy. So my feelings don't matter at all." Finally, my anger exploded. I slammed the table, causing a glass to topple and water to spill onto the floor. "Ah, you're so noisy. I didn't think you were such a troublesome woman." Cody picked up his carry-on bag again and opened the living room door. "Then, I'm going home." "Going home? Where to?" "To my real home, obviously. It seems like a hassle to stay with you now. I won't come here for a while. Cool off in the meantime." Leaving these words as if I was the villain, Cody left the house. "Coward! Irresponsible man!" I threw a tissue box, but the front door closed mercilessly, and Cody never came back after that. I won't let this go. Didn't he realize in these 3 years that I'm not a woman who would just let things slide? I decided to make Cody pay for this. The next day, I called Misty Harris, Cody's legal wife, whose number was in the investigator's report. A woman answered, and I could hear a boy's voice in the background. "Hello, are you Misty Harris, Cody's wife?" "Yes, I am. My name is Rachel Thunderbolt. I've been, well acquainted with Cody." Unsure how to start, my words trailed off, and Misty sounded very puzzled. I briefly explained the situation and arranged to meet her in person soon. At a coffee shop, as soon as we met, Misty glared at me with disdain. "You have the nerve to show up after messing with someone else's husband." "Wait, please. I'm a victim too." I showed her the investigator's report and explained everything in detail. "I still can't believe I was the other woman." "Cody doing such a thing. Unforgivable." Misty believed me after seeing the evidence and was visibly furious. "I understand the situation now. Not only did he play with your feelings, Rachel, but he's also been deceiving me all this time. So, I want to punish Cody, and I need your help." "All right, I'll help you." And so, we conspired together to plan our revenge on Cody. The day of reckoning came. On his day off, Cody was relaxing in front of the TV at Misty's house. Their elementary school-aged child was out with friends, so seizing the moment, I stormed into the house. "Your other wife has graciously come to visit," Misty announced, leading me to the living room. Cody, who had been lounging, sprang up in shock at the sight of me. "Geez! Rachel!" "Long time no see, Cody." "What? Why? How?" Cody, in confusion, pointed alternately between us. "What's this? When did you two meet?" "Misty and I have become very close friends." "Huh." At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Misty's parents, along with Cody's, arrived, looking furious. Cody, who was lounging around in sweatpants, straightened up quickly.
What? What brings everyone here together?
He was completely intimidated by their devilish expressions.
Rachel, did you set this up?
I got Misty's help too.
So, Cody, you have no allies here.
By yesterday, Misty had already told her parents that Cody was cheating. I had managed to get the contact details of Cody's parents, who were actually alive, and sent them a registered letter with the investigator's report and a summary of everything that had happened. And I called them here for Cody's punishment.
What are you doing? What's your aim with all this? First, you have something you need to do, right? You know what it is?
You want money?
No. You should start with an apology.
Pressed by my stern words, Cody looked pleadingly at Misty, who just stared back expressionlessly.
We'll demand compensation after you've done what you should. Right, Cody!
Misty and I towered over Cody, who had squatted down in exhaustion. Both Misty's and Cody's parents surrounded him with stern looks.
Wait, if you two are getting along so well, there's no need to fight, right? Why not keep things as they are, maintain both families?
Even in this situation, Cody tried to escape responsibility. He was just alpha an irresponsible person.
I like both of you. I wanted to maintain good relationships, something like that.
His shameless attitude was almost refreshing in its thoroughness. But both sets of parents berated him fiercely.
Are you joking? Don't you feel sorry for Misty and Rachel?
Shouts and tearful voices filled the air, and Cody shrank back, letting out a pathetic whimper. I took a deep breath and spoke calmly.
I understand exactly what you want. You do? So we can keep things this way, right? No way! I'm utterly disappointed. I'm breaking up with you. And I'll be expecting compensation, so make sure you're prepared.
What? No. As I declared my decision to part ways, Misty followed suit.
I'm divorcing you too. Expect to pay compensation and child support. I don't ever want to see your face again. Get out!
Cody looked up at me, his eyes tearing, and tried to plead.
Before I say, don't think of coming back to my place. I won't let you in. I'll apologize properly. Let's submit our marriage application this time, right? Let's get married. Don't be ridiculous. I never want to see you again. Goodbye.
Cody was disowned by his parents then and there, losing his last refuge. He was ousted from Misty's house by everyone present and stood dazed outside the gate. That was the anticlimactic end of our relationship. Now, for the epilogue. Cody, having to pay us compensation and losing everything, stayed at cheap hotels and internet cafes. But after my call to his company about his business trip raised suspicion, his boss confronted him, and his double life was exposed. The whole company found out through the colleague who took the call, so Cody quit his job, fleeing in shame. True to his irresponsible nature, he ran away just because he felt uncomfortable, despite having no money. Eventually, Cody ran out of money and became homeless, as I heard. As for me, I ended my relationship with Cody, but the emotional scars of spending 3 years as the other woman didn't heal easily. I buried myself in work to forget, leading to a life consumed by my job. A male colleague, concerned about me, asked, "Is something wrong?" and we started going out for drinks together. While venting over drinks, I found myself crying, but he just silently supported me. Having lost trust in people, I began to feel that maybe I could trust this man, and we started dating. I'm experiencing a modest happiness now. Someday, I'm sure I'll find true happiness.
Lazy, good-for-nothings who don't do housework or cook deserves a divorce. I'll demand $80,000 in compensation.
Looking down at me lying in bed, Alexander suddenly blurted that out. Just when I thought he had come home, he's talking about divorce. Calling me useless for not doing housework or cooking. And claiming $80,000 in divorce compensation is absurd. Despite the fact that I've fallen ill due to the stress from Alexander. I had reached my limit with Alexander's unbearable treatment. But my body wouldn't move as I wished, and I couldn't even get up. I didn't want to let things go Alexander's way. With that determination, I forced a smile while still lying down. Fine by me. Alexander, not expecting me to agree to the divorce so easily, had a look of shock spread across his face. There's no turning back now. I'll make him regret all the times he's belittled me. My name is Amelia. I work at an IT company and I am turning 38 this year. Most of my work is remote and my days are busy but fulfilling. There are tough times, but it's a rewarding job. My friends from my student days often say, "It's amazing you can work so hard." It felt good to be respected for being so dedicated to my work. 2 years ago, I even started a family. I married my husband, Alexander. I met Alexander 4 years ago at a busy restaurant downtown, out for dinner with friends. As we were leaving the restaurant and walking, "Excuse me." I was approached from behind. I turned to see who it was. The man wore a shirt and a jacket, the epitome of a capable office worker. "You left this at the restaurant," he said, handing over a mobile phone. Which to my surprise was undoubtedly mine. "I'm sorry, thank you so much." "No problem, glad I made it in time. Hey, would you like to go to a pub with me?" Alexander, relieved to have returned the phone, unexpectedly invited me out. Surprised again, I glanced at my friends who were about to part ways. They gave me a go-ahead smile as if saying, "Please go. If you are okay with me, sure." Actually, I had messed up at work that day and still wanted to talk more. My friend had a date with her boyfriend and couldn't stay out late, so Alexander's invitation was perfect timing. After parting with my friend, I went to a nearby pub with Alexander. That was the beginning with my now husband, Alexander. At the pub, we shared work frustrations and quickly hit it off, feeling as comfortable as if we were old friends. When we left, Alexander asked for my contact. And we started seeing each other, leading to marriage 2 years later. It was surprisingly smooth, even astonishing to me. Considering my focus had always been on work, I was lucky to even get married. That's what I thought at the time. "Amelia, get me some beer," asked Alexander, lounging on the sofa and fiddling with his phone in the living room. I sighed yet again. How many times has it been? I've lost count. It's been 2 years since I married Alexander, and I'm nearing my limit with his sloppiness. Alexander, who works at a well-known bank, always boasts about being an elite and claims that people working at the bank are the most important. I had no idea before marrying that he thought so highly of himself. I knew he was proud of his work, but being constantly reminded is exhausting. "I'm tired of getting it for you. I'm busy, get it yourself." I was working and couldn't cater to Alexander's request, so I refused. Then Alexander, scratching the back of his head, said in annoyance, "You call remote work busy? I had all sorts of tasks at the office today and I'm exhausted." He scolded. "Just because it's remote work doesn't mean it's easy." Even when I retorted, he would shoot back at me with sarcasm. "Anyone can say that. You can take breaks whenever you want." I got tired of arguing back and silently stood up from my chair and reluctantly went shopping. Here, I bought the beer. Alexander didn't thank me for shopping, nor did he pay for it, just silently taking the beer. Then he was absorbed in his phone again. This is more like master and servant than husband and wife. Why did Alexander marry me? No, why did I marry Alexander? I sighed. It goes without saying that Alexander left all the household chores to me and did none himself. As a dual-income couple, I once suggested we share the chores. Share the chores? Don't joke. You're always home, Amelia. It's only natural for you to do them. He laughed it off. But I do go to the office sometimes, and I can't always do all the chores. Office visits are rare, right? Hire a housekeeper for those days. Alexander stubbornly refused to do any chores. He belittles my job as easy, rushing me to finish the chores, and yet often seeks physical intimacy at night. However, there's no sign of us having children. If there's a reason, it's probably me. I've heard women in their late 30s have a harder time conceiving. I thought if we couldn't have children, we should enjoy our marriage, but Alexander seemed unhappy. Can't even have kids, what's the point of marriage? He said dismissively, and I was infuriated. He's useless at home himself. I doubt he's really competent at his job. A truly capable person manages personal affairs well and easily handles household chores. I had my doubts about Alexander's work performance. Speaking of doubts, in the past few months, Alexander's return home had been noticeably later than usual. I don't know about the busy season in banking, but when I comment, "You've been busy lately. Unlike you, my job is tough," he would just respond so and nothing else. Suspicion was inevitable when he continued coming home past midnight for months. I naturally suspected infidelity. One night, Alexander came home late as usual and collapsed at the entrance. Approaching him, he seemed too drunk to stand. With his eyes closing, he was about to lose consciousness. Sighing, I moved to unfasten his tie, and then Alexander muttered, "Hold up, Victoria. Come on, just a little longer?" Hearing that sweet, melting tone, I was shocked. "Victoria? Who's that?" Whether it was sleep talk or drunken confusion, Alexander simply fell into a comfortable sleep. Now seriously suspicious, I installed cameras around the house. Next week, I'll be away on a business trip for the weekend. If Alexander is cheating, it's the perfect opportunity to bring his lover home while I'm away. Of course, there's no certainty he'll bring someone home, but it would be evidence if he did. That's why I installed the cameras. A week later, with an oblivious face, I said, "Well then, I'm off on my business trip." To which Alexander waved smiling. "Have a good trip." His face looked too happy, and it angered me. 2 days later, returning from the trip, I immediately checked the camera footage. Sure enough, there was Alexander, bringing his lover home and into our bed. I couldn't watch it all, it made me nauseous, so I stopped midway. But this was clear evidence of infidelity. I clenched my fist, almost crushing the camera. This was unforgivable. There's a limit to how much he can mock me. Did he think this would be forgiven? Once it was certain Alexander was cheating, I was filled with anger and sadness. Afterward, each time Alexander insulted me about the food or the dirty floor, my stress built up. I was contemplating when to tell him about the divorce, but my work suddenly got busier and I lost the right timing. Eventually, overwhelmed by work and household chores, my body couldn't keep up. One day, I suddenly collapsed with a high fever. I took the day off work. Of course, I couldn't do any housework either. Alexander must have known I was unwell from the morning, but he left for work silently and returned home at 6 p.m. Earlier than usual. Then, he came to where I lay sick in bed. The smell of alcohol made me feel nauseous. Without a care for me, Alexander smirked. "Lazy, good-for-nothings who don't do housework or cook deserves a divorce. I'll demand $80,000 in compensation." Looking down at me lying in bed, Alexander suddenly blurted that out. Divorce, out of nowhere? Calling me useless for not doing housework or cooking? And demanding $80,000 in divorce compensation is absurd. I've fallen ill because of the stress from Alexander. I was reaching my limit with his treatment. But my body wouldn't move as I wished, and I couldn't even get up. I didn't want things to go Alexander's way. With that determination, I forced a smile while still lying down. Fine by me. Not expecting me to accept the divorce so easily, Alexander's face showed shock. There's no turning back now. I'll make him regret belittling me all this time. A few days later, when my fever subsided and I was back to normal, I first got the divorce papers. After signing my part, I waited for Alexander to come home. I'm home. That day, Alexander came back at 10 p.m. reeking of alcohol and a perfume I'd never smelled before. I confronted him with the divorce papers as he arrived.
Please, let's get divorced.
When I said that in a low voice, Alexander laughed mockingly and took the papers. Finally, I can be free. It was unclear if his sarcastic remark was for me or himself, but he smirked disgustingly. If he wanted a divorce so much, he should have prepared the papers himself, but he probably wanted me to bring it up. I was disgusted with his nasty character.
I'll claim for compensation in the divorce.
Thinking Alexander pathetic for expecting compensation after cheating. I didn't say anything there, just silently watched the divorce proceedings. The next day, I submitted the divorce papers and was finally free from being Alexander's slave. The divorce ended anticlimactically. But just divorcing Alexander wasn't enough to forgive him. I decided to take action for revenge against Alexander. Over several days, I packed my belongings. I was leaving this house. It was a used apartment we bought when we married 2 years ago, but I wasn't attached. So, I decided to leave myself. Don't ever come back. Alexander watched me pack, laughing with glee. He was probably planning to live with his lover in this house once I left. A nauseating thought, but the footage showed Alexander was quite smitten with his lover. Ignoring Alexander's words, I left the house with my belongings.
Phew, at least now I'm free from Alexander's abuse.
I sighed in relief. I immediately went to a real estate agent and got introduced to a property I could move into right away. It was a bit small, but the rent was cheap and it was a nice women-only apartment. I quickly finalized the contract for the apartment. I'd have to live in a hotel for about a week until I could move in, but that was fine. Afterward, I finished some procedures at the bank and checked into the hotel. All the while, I was plotting my revenge against Alexander. And the plan I came up with gave me goosebumps.
That's it. This is the only way.
Imagining Alexander's astonished face made me almost laugh. Just watch. Don't think this is the end of the matter. The next day, I immediately set my plan into action. I felt bold for what I did. After finishing the work, I was satisfied. Afterward, life went on peacefully without any incidents. Being single again was so easy, not having to cook or do laundry for Alexander. I regretted not divorcing him sooner. A month later, I got a call in the middle of the night. Woken up by my mobile phone's ringtone, I wondered who it could be at this hour and saw it was Alexander. I ignored it at first, but the calls kept coming. Ignoring it further would only disrupt my sleep. Reluctantly, I answered the call. Hello? I answered sleepily, hearing the sounds of cars and buses in the background. Apparently, he was outside. I waited for Alexander's reply, clearly annoyed at being woken up and subjected to the noise.
Amelia, you finally picked up. What is this about?
Alexander's yelling voice echoed in my ear. I knew what he was going to say, but acted like I had no clue.
What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I got a call from the bank yesterday. They suddenly fired me. I'm on my honeymoon in Italy, and this makes no sense.
Ah, a honeymoon in Italy. There must be a significant time difference. Hence the call at this hour. Typical of Alexander, not considering my situation.
That's tough. Good luck with that, bye.
I responded casually, about to hang up.
Hey, wait.
But Alexander protested loudly, so I sighed and paused before hanging up.
I asked why I was fired. They said I caused the bank to lose a client. And guess which company that client was? It was yours, Amelia.
Alexander explained the circumstances of his firing, but I had expected this to happen. After all, I was the one who planned it. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. If I was going to get my revenge on Alexander, now was the time. After taking a deep breath, I began to speak.
Yes, I know. Because I'm the one who stopped doing business with your bank, Alexander.
There was a gasp of surprise on the other end. I could hear the pampered voice of his mistress next to Alexander. Unperturbed, I continued.
You might not have known, but it's my company. I'm the CEO.
Yes, I'm the CEO. Alexander thought I was just a regular remote worker, but in reality, I'm the boss, just not often on site. I quit my first job right after graduating college and succeeded in starting my own dream company within 3 years, which has been growing for over a decade. The bank where Alexander worked was the one that had provided significant loans to my company. After leaving Alexander, I decided to repay all the money I borrowed from the bank. The sales representative was shocked. They would lose the interest they were supposed to receive. The lump sum repayment must have been an unexpected event for the bank.
Could you reconsider your decision?
The sales representative asked me in a panic. To that, I placed my demand. There's just one condition. Fire Alexander Grant. I decided to request that. The representative hurriedly brought their supervisor. He was someone I knew from before. What happened all of a sudden? When the senior executive asked me, I decided to tell everything. Actually, Alexander Grant was having an affair with your president's daughter. He mocked me terribly, divorced me without paying any compensation, and now he's about to remarry. I couldn't stand it. The information about Alexander's affair with the president's daughter came from the footage of the hidden camera in the house. The audio was captured too, so I heard all the conversations between Alexander and his mistress. Both the representative and the executive turned pale when they heard my story and seemed to want to continue doing business with my company. Probably, the news reached the president, who must have been furious to learn his daughter was having an affair with a married man. They promised to fire Alexander, so I reconsidered the lump sum repayment. That's why I'm still doing business with the bank where Alexander worked. I knew about Alexander's firing even before he told me over the phone.
You're the dishonest one. You made me do all the housework, mocked me, and cheated. And yet you think I'm the bad one? Can't you see things ethically, Alexander? Is that what you call being an elite? Ridiculous. I'll claim for compensation in the divorce. To think you, the cheater, could claim anything is absurd. Also, I changed the ownership of the house loan. I was the one paying it, but now it's your responsibility.
I unloaded all the stress I had received onto Alexander over the phone.
What?
Alexander seemed unable to counter my justified argument. But then, a weaker voice than before came from the other end of the line. Please, forgive me. Spare me the divorce compensation. And the house loan too. Victoria is pregnant. I can't imagine being in debt when the child is born. I've been fired and am at a loss. Please, let me off the hook. Alexander's pathetic apology only made me sigh. I felt stupid for enduring this man for 2 years.
Forgive? There's nothing to forgive. I want nothing to do with you, Alexander. The compensation is a settlement. This is all your fault, isn't it? Why should I have to put up with it? I won't talk to you again. You can keep running away in Italy for all I care. Goodbye.
Ignoring Alexander's plea to wait, I hung up. He should be grateful I even answered his late-night call. Sighing, I went back to bed. I probably won't talk to Alexander again. I can live my life without any connection to him. Later, after Alexander and his mistress returned from Italy, my lawyer claimed the divorce compensation. Alexander had apparently spent a lot of money on his mistress, leaving almost no savings. The mistress, being the president's daughter, was scolded and disowned by her father. So, they couldn't rely on her parents' money and had to go into debt. Finding a new job was difficult for Alexander, as his recent scandal was widely known. Though he always claimed to be an elite banker, I heard he often slacked off at work, affecting his performance. For the company, it was a perfect excuse to fire him. Alexander and his mistress are now living off part-time jobs. With her being pregnant, she won't be able to work soon. I doubt Alexander can support 3 people on his own. Well, they deserve to struggle as far as I'm concerned. Meanwhile, my business is thriving. And I received a larger loan from the bank where Alexander worked. My salary has increased, and I'm planning to buy my own house. Building my own home has been a dream for a long time. And I'm looking forward to it. I may have lost a husband, but I have friends and supportive business partners. I'm in an incredibly fortunate situation and am ready to continue working hard. I was sick in bed, which caused a huge delay in preparing for Christmas. While I was busily working, my husband Oliver had gone out somewhere. Entering Oliver's room, I noticed a bag sticking out of a drawer. I picked it up. Inside the bag was an SD card. Seeing it placed with a message card that read "For Oliver," I had a bad feeling. Just as Oliver returned home, I waited for him to take a shower and sneaked back into his room to check the contents on the computer.
What is this?
I was shocked at the footage. At the same time, anger surged through me. I'm going to divorce him. Determined, I gathered our relatives at our home the next day. Now, please look at this. As my voice caught the attention of the relatives and Oliver towards the TV, I pressed the play button. The scene that appeared left our relatives speechless and Oliver pale.
Why?
To Oliver, who turned to me in disbelief, I smiled and handed him the divorce papers. I will never forgive him. I'll make him regret this. My name is Sophia. A 34-year-old housewife. My parents passed away early, but thanks to a large inheritance and the kindness of the neighbors, I could pursue my dream job as a preschool teacher. I resigned from teaching when I was 30. To marry my childhood friend, Oliver. The catalyst for our relationship was my parents' accidental death. Being a high school student and facing college entrance exams, I didn't want to move. I was determined to attend the college my parents had supported. However, my relatives, eyeing the large inheritance left by my parents, tried to take me in. Almost strangers to me, their intentions felt creepy. Oliver, my husband-to-be, shooed these relatives away when I was vulnerable from losing my parents. Oliver, the eldest son of our neighboring family, was like an older brother to me. In front of the relatives, he declared, "We'll take care of her. We have permission from my parents, so no complaints. Sophia will be my wife in the future." Surprised by Oliver's words, who I had always seen as a brother, he turned out to be serious, confessing his feelings later. His earnest nature and the security he provided became my solace, and we started dating. Oliver always prioritized me, and eventually, I genuinely fell in love with him. When I became comfortable in my job as a preschool teacher, he proposed. I meant what I said when we were students. My feelings haven't changed. I will make you happy, marry me.
Absolutely.
Overwhelmed, I accepted his proposal with tears. Telling his parents, they rejoiced, and we celebrated that night. After marrying and 2 years of marriage, I retired to become a housewife. Oliver had requested me to become a housewife, something that triggered this change. Though it was sad to leave my dream job, I decided to focus on having children and use my experience in parenting. Oliver has a younger sister. Emma, my sister-in-law, was my classmate since kindergarten. She was also my best friend and colleague at the childcare center. Emma had mixed feelings about me marrying Oliver. That is because she and Oliver don't get along. Oliver has always been kind to you, but unreasonable to me. Really?
Absolutely.
I often listened without arguing, as Emma insisted. According to Emma, she was delighted to have me as a relative. But not as Oliver's wife. Pretending to lament, she often complained about marrying her disliked brother. From my perspective, though Oliver might be somewhat cold to Emma, it was clear they were still connected by blood. However, Emma didn't seem to think so, often showing dissatisfaction when I suggested this. Sophia, you say that because you don't know Oliver's true face. I wonder. I always responded, doubting Emma's claims. Looking back, I regret not paying more attention, but at that time, I thought it was just sibling dynamics. But even after 5 years of marriage, we didn't have any children. Then, I noticed a gradual change in Oliver's attitude. At first, he complained about our housework being split equally since I became a housewife, and soon, I was doing 90% of it. Without kids and just relaxing at home all day, you could at least do a bit more housework, right? These unkind words, something the old Oliver would never say, hurt me, but I accepted them as my duty as a housewife. From there, Oliver started to push more household responsibilities on me, citing my role as a housewife. One day, while visiting my in-laws, Oliver suddenly started belittling me, laughing. "Sophia's cooking is just awful. And her cleaning is so sloppy, can't she do something about it?" The living room fell silent, but Oliver didn't notice. In fact, he began to mock me even more. "The laundry is also carelessly done, she hardly works at all for a housewife." I could feel Emma getting irritated beside me. Isabella, my mother-in-law, smiled, but her eyes weren't laughing. I had to say something. I might be a bit absent-minded at times, so maybe Oliver finds me lacking in some ways. But there's a way to say things. Emma glared at Oliver as she spoke. Oliver glared back, and the living room atmosphere turned tense. Then Lucas, as my father-in-law, began to speak calmly. "A husband should help with his wife's shortcomings. Besides, Sophia always helps us out a lot." Oliver, discontented, kept quiet at Lucas's words. Emma was still angry, but Isabella calmed her down. The mood was ruined because of Oliver's words. I tried to lighten the mood, clapping my hands and smiling. "Hey! I made a cake, would you like to have some? Sophia's cakes are delicious. I'm so happy, let's eat." Emma's mood brightened instantly, and I felt relieved. Then Isabella, Emma, and I moved to the kitchen. "Sorry about Oliver earlier. We know how hard you always work, Sophia. Don't push yourself too much." "Isabella, thank you." Isabella's kind words almost brought me to tears. Returning to the living room, Oliver sat turned away, looking more upset than before. "I brought the cake." "I don't want it." "But it's your favorite pumpkin cake."
I said I don't want it.
As Oliver yelled, the plate with the cake disappeared from my hands. Looking down, the smashed cake was stuck to the floor.
"Oliver! Apologize to Sophia! It's her fault for forcing it on me."
Oliver, though looking confused, refused to apologize to me. I was a little saddened. He used to apologize immediately in the past. That's awful. "Sophia, you should divorce him."
"What? Don't be ridiculous. It's not your decision to make."
Emma and Oliver started bickering, ignoring me, and their argument heated up.
"Unlovable women can't get married. When I get married is none of your business."
I desperately tried to calm down the shouting Emma. Oliver, looking at us in disdain, laughed and left, saying he was going out for a drink. "Oliver's been going out a lot lately. Yeah, he never tells me where he's going." "Don't worry too much, I'll ask around too." I thanked the ever-kind Isabella. My in-laws always doted on me, treating me like their own daughter. They scolded me when I was wrong, feeling like a second set of parents. Part of the reason I married Oliver was because of my relationship with my in-laws. The thought of becoming a family with my beloved in-laws and Emma made me happy. But it was true that I still loved Oliver. However, since then, Oliver's treatment of me became increasingly harsh. "I'm going out." "Again? Where have you been going every weekend recently?"
"Anywhere I want."
After a while, Oliver started going out somewhere every weekend. Sometimes even staying overnight, but he stubbornly refused to tell me where. Moreover, he was always angry, and our usual conversations diminished. I once asked if I had done something wrong, but I never got a satisfying answer. Amidst this, as Christmas approached, I fell ill. Isabella came to help at our house. It took about a week to fully recover, and I had to start preparing for Christmas slowly, dragging my heavy body around, since Oliver wouldn't help. I was sick in bed, which caused a huge delay in preparing for Christmas. While I was busily working, Oliver had gone out somewhere. Entering Oliver's room, I noticed a bag sticking out of a drawer. I picked it up. Inside the bag was an SD card. Seeing it with a message card that read "For Oliver," I had a bad feeling. Just as Oliver returned home, I waited for him to take a shower and sneaked back into his room to check the contents on the computer.
What is this?
I was speechless at the footage. At the same time, anger surged through me. I'm going to divorce him. Determined, I gathered our relatives at our in-laws' house the next day.
Now, please look at this.
As my voice directed the relatives and Oliver towards the TV, I pressed the play button. The scene that appeared left our relatives speechless, and Oliver turned pale. Why? As Oliver looked at me in disbelief, I smiled and handed him the divorce papers. I will never forgive him, I'll make him regret this. Seeing the divorce papers, Oliver's face turned even bluer.
Wait, hold on. Divorce is too sudden.
What are you talking about? After seeing that video, there's no other option but divorce. Oliver felt silent at my words. The content of the SD card was a childbirth scene. Of course, it wasn't mine. A young woman was struggling through labor. At first, I wondered why such a thing existed, but then I recognized the man beside the woman. It was unmistakably Oliver, stroking the woman's head and encouraging her.
Keep going!
I couldn't mistake Oliver's voice, having known him since childhood.
This is... I was just standing in, it's not what you think. Don't lie to me.
I turned up the volume on the TV. Then a conversation between the woman and Oliver filled the living room.
Evelyn! It's almost time! Our child is about to be born! Oliver, yes, I'll keep going!
After their conversation, a baby's cry could be heard. Then Oliver kissed the woman named Evelyn, thanking her repeatedly.
You did great. You worked so hard.
I did it for you, my love. I love you too. Oh, Evelyn. I can't wait to live with you and our child. Me either. After saying that and kissing again, the video stopped. The relatives in the living room were stunned, and my in-laws and Emma were visibly trembling with anger.
Well, after watching this, no one would believe he was just standing in as a proxy. I just got carried away. It was just an act of a father.
Lucas is usually a calm person, suddenly stepped forward and slapped Oliver. Oliver held his cheek in shock. Lucas was a gentleman who only got angry when necessary, and had never resorted to physical action. Everyone was surprised by this.
Do you understand what you're saying? Don't you feel sorry for Sophia? But this is...
Even then, Oliver tried desperately to explain himself. Emma spoke up in a calm voice.
I've always disliked you, but I thought I could maintain our relationship if you cherished my best friend. But someone who hurts my important friend can't be considered family. I'm cutting ties with you.
At Emma's words, Oliver's face turned red with anger.
You, a younger sister, are so presumptuous. If you want to cut ties, go ahead. It's a relief.
Then I'll cut ties too.
Eh?
Oliver froze at Isabella's words, said with a smile. He tries to hide it, but Oliver is quite the mama's boy. I like Isabella too, so it never really bothered me, but to be honest, I didn't really like how he clung to her, even nearing 40. Oliver seemed bewildered by Isabella's declaration of cutting ties.
But I'm the eldest son, right? Mom, you're joking about cutting ties, right?
Do you think I'm someone who would joke in this situation?
No.
Isabella never lost her smile. That made it even scarier, and the whispering relatives straightened up and began listening quietly to her. Isabella continued in a calm and steady voice. Don't worry about us. After all, we have Sophia. If she remarries someone wonderful and has children, they will be our grandchildren.
What? If she divorces, she's a stranger, right?
Not just Isabella, but Lucas, Emma, and I all sighed heavily at Oliver's response. In fact, after marrying, I had been legally adopted by my in-laws. It wasn't necessary, but my own relatives, eyeing my parents' inheritance, often pressured me into an adoption agreement. Your parents' inheritance is yours to use as you wish. But to protect you from those relatives, why don't you consider being legally adopted by us? After my parents passed away, my in-laws never asked me for money. I had prepared tuition and living expenses for my inheritance and gave the living expenses to my in-laws. However, they didn't touch it, saying it was important money, and when I got a job, they even added a celebration gift and returned it to me. I initially refused, but they insisted, so I gratefully accepted. Because of this history, I trusted Isabella's words. That's why I consulted with Oliver and got legally adopted right after our marriage. It seemed Oliver had completely forgotten about it.
No, but even if I was adopted, I'm the eldest son, the real child. That's right. I have a child. This house is mine.
Oliver, as if he had remembered something important, was met with laughter from Isabella. What are you talking about? As of today, you are no longer my child. Well, legally you'll still be my child, but we'll have to renounce your inheritance. Oliver was speechless at the decisive words. Tears streamed down his face from the rejection of his beloved Isabella. I added to Oliver's misery. By the way, do you know why I called everyone here today? Oliver looked at me, puzzled. His tear-stained face was dirty. I felt a bit pathetic for having loved such a pitiful man. Christmas was always celebrated at my in-laws' house. They were landowners in the area, with many relatives nearby. There was no other place that could accommodate our large family of nearly 50 people. But this time, we limited the number of people, having only families with children come from the relative side. So, there were only about 20 people in the living room, half of the usual number. It seemed Oliver hadn't even noticed that. After I pointed it out, he finally realized.
There are no children? But I hear crying. Are they in another room?
Oh, actually, we have a guest today. Please, come in. At my words, Emma stood up and opened the door at the back. There stood Evelyn, confidently with a baby in her arms. Evelyn stood there, holding the baby. Her demeanor saying she belonged and was welcomed.
Nice to meet you, Isabella. I'm Evelyn. This is Liam, our son, the fruit of my love with Oliver.
Evelyn said this cheerfully, but Isabella frowned. Though behind a door, she must have heard the conversation. But then I noticed the earphones in Evelyn's hands.
Were you listening to music in the next room?
Yeah, I was bored. Evelyn's attitude towards Isabella was starkly indifferent. She acted as if she was the rightful wife, and I was irritated, but realized she would soon be.
Do you know why you were invited today? Isn't it because you're getting a divorce? And then I'll be Oliver's wife. We have Liam too, so it's a celebration, right?
Her naive thinking made me sigh. In this atmosphere, thinking it's a celebration is just unbelievable. Oliver was frozen by the suddenness of it all, but seeing Evelyn's cluelessness seemed to bring him back to reality. Evelyn, we're in the middle of a difficult conversation. I'll contact you later, just wait a little longer.
I can't wait anymore. Write the divorce papers now.
Evelyn said this, handing a pen to Oliver. Then she looked at me, smirking in a mocking way. Sophia, was it? Thank you for your service until today. From now on, I will be the one receiving Oliver's love. Even with her triumphant tone, I just found it outright creepy. Since I saw that video of the childbirth scene, my love for Oliver is completely lost. I don't need his love, even if he begged me to take it. But to Evelyn, it seemed like I was regretful. Sorry about that. Oliver says I have firmer skin and am prettier to hold than you. He said you're like a skinny chicken. Evelyn laughed dismissively, with Oliver awkwardly trying to stop her. The onlookers' eyes were cold towards the two of them. I decided to respond with a smile and addressed Evelyn's comment.
No, thank you for keeping him company. I don't need him anymore, so please take him.
Evelyn's eyebrows twitched slightly at my words. She seemed about to say something, but I ignored her and continued. Well, you're getting a man who's about to be disowned, lose his house and job, and become poor. Evelyn's face clouded over. She probably thought that after Oliver and I divorced, she would stay in this house. While thinking how she would have known otherwise if she had listened earlier, I continued to smile at Evelyn.
Oliver, wait. Sophia's the one leaving, right? This is Oliver's house, right? I'm becoming your wife, right? You said I could be the housewife.
Evelyn confronted Oliver. Oliver looked uncomfortable and avoided her gaze.
Oliver, look at me. What are we going to do? I quit my job, remember? You said Liam could stay with Isabella and we'd live in luxury.
Evelyn started to freak out, scratching her hair. Startled by her shouting, Liam also began to cry, his cries echoing in the living room. I reluctantly took Liam from Evelyn and held him. He must be about 4 months old, just starting to hold his head up, and he was very cute. When I gently rocked him, he calmed down and fell asleep again. Relieved, I noticed Evelyn glaring at me.
Give him back! That's my and Oliver's child. The grandchild of this house.
He just fell asleep, so please don't raise your voice. While I was speaking, Evelyn snatched Liam back from me and returned him to the baby carrier. Liam woke up for a moment, but fell asleep again as Evelyn rocked him. I looked at her, relieved. Evelyn was glaring at me as if I were her sworn enemy.
You think you can just take Liam away? You're useless. A woman who can't get pregnant should leave this house.
At Evelyn's words, I realized Oliver hadn't told her about that incident. It was about why I quit my job as a preschool teacher.
Evelyn, didn't Oliver tell you why we didn't have children?
I don't know.
Isn't it because you're not loved?
Evelyn said this, looking triumphant. As if she was superior as a woman. But that didn't matter to me. Oliver was pale-faced in the background, but I continued, revealing the truth.
Oliver, I've always been unable to have children.
Evelyn's momentum stopped abruptly, as if it were a lie. The surrounding relatives were also stunned. Actually, I quit my job after having a miscarriage. I wanted children so badly, I went for a checkup for the first time when I tried to conceive. Oliver also had tests done with me. The results showed no issues with me, but Oliver had a condition making it difficult for him to have children. It wasn't impossible, but a natural conception was highly unlikely. The pregnancy we had was a miracle, but it ended due to genetic issues. I was sad, but wanted to try again. Oliver felt the same, so we started fertility treatments. Fortunately, there was still plenty of inheritance left, so I quit my job on Oliver's suggestion, to focus on my health. However, we saw no success with the treatments, and when we started considering adoption, Oliver became reluctant. Looking back, he probably started his affair during our treatments, and Evelyn's pregnancy came to light around the time we talked about adoption. Evelyn turned pale upon hearing this and looked at Oliver.
So, Evelyn, is Liam really Oliver's child? It's not impossible, right? Our love.
Her talking about love at this point was just absurd. I smiled and said again. That's why I said, natural conception is almost impossible.
But.
Evelyn was flustered, trying to make excuses. Emma cut her off.
Stop lying. You're my friend's wife, right?
What? Oliver looked at Emma, wide-eyed. Emma nodded at me and showed Evelyn her mobile phone screen. It showed Evelyn and Liam, a man, and a 4-year-old girl I didn't know. I had contacted Emma after watching the video the day before. Emma recognized Evelyn from the photo on SNS, belonging to a man she knew.
I knew it was Evelyn by her name and face. We work at the same place and talk often. You're married?
Oliver asked, but Evelyn didn't answer. Her expression confirmed Emma's words were true.
It was a shotgun wedding, right? No talk of divorce, and this photo says Liam is that man's child. No. True love, huh? Pretending your husband's child is another man's, to switch to a richer man.
Is it the money you love? Emma looked down on Evelyn with disdain. Evelyn, red-faced and shaking, didn't know how to respond and just looked down.
By the way, I've called that man, he'll be here soon. No! It was just a moment of weakness. Please don't tell my husband.
It's too late for that. At Emma's words, the doorbell rang, and Evelyn collapsed in despair. A relative opened the door, and Evelyn's husband, Henry, came in. He saw Evelyn and immediately shouted in anger.
You've been cheating on me? What were you thinking? It's not like that. It's a misunderstanding. I heard everything on the phone.
Realizing there was no escape, Evelyn froze in tears. Henry took Liam from her and stood up. Then apologized to us. My wife has caused you a lot of trouble. We will divorce.
Wait, I don't want a divorce.
Henry looked down on Evelyn coldly.
You promised to stop after the affair 3 years ago.
And you continued.
I'll raise the child. You won't see him again.
We were shocked by Henry's words. I couldn't believe that even though he had noticed it once, he continued to do it behind the scenes. Such audacity to claim a momentary lapse.
3 years ago, huh? No, Sophia, it's not like that.
What's different?
Going around marking your territory elsewhere?
At my words, Oliver just trembled, barely moving his mouth. I'm not usually one to get angry. But Emma once told me it's scary when I do. I'd hardly ever been angry with Oliver, so he seemed surprised by my attitude. I'm disappointed in you.
I can't believe you've been betraying your family for so long. I tried to get you and Emma to reconcile, but it looks like I was the one who couldn't see clearly.
Emma nodded as if to say, finally you understand. Oliver was stunned by my straightforwardness.
I'll be asking for compensation. And of course, child support. Eh?
I touched my stomach. I had been keeping it a secret, except from Emma, planning to announce it at Christmas. I was pregnant. The reason I'd been feeling unwell recently was morning sickness. After entering the stable period, I planned to surprise my parents and Oliver. The artificial insemination worked. It's truly your child. I kept quiet because I didn't want to get your hopes up and then disappoint you.
So.
Oliver collapsed, overwhelmed by my words. Evelyn, too, seemed drained of all energy to argue after hearing about my pregnancy and her own impending divorce. Then, please fill out the divorce papers. I said this and handed Oliver a pen. Then I left the house first with Emma. By now, Oliver must be getting glared at by the in-laws while filling out the divorce papers. Feeling refreshed after saying everything I wanted, I enjoyed a leisurely tea party with Emma. Later, Oliver and I finalized our divorce. Since his job was with a family company, he was fired due to this incident and ended up penniless and out of the house. Evelyn got divorced too and initially demanded money from Oliver. But seeing his situation, she quickly disappeared. In the end, Oliver had been working in a rundown snack bar to pay for the alimony and child support, but rumors have it that he was caught by some bad customers and taken away. I know about this because Emma, laughing about the fleeting nature of true love, told me. It was information from Henry, Evelyn's ex-husband. Lately, he's been going out more with his children, and it seems that Oliver's story comes up in their conversations. Henry, in fact, was the one Emma had a crush on during her student days. Though he reciprocated her feelings, he married Evelyn when she got pregnant. Emma denies it, but her blushing suggests that maybe, just maybe, spring is near for her. After Oliver left, my in-laws were initially down, but they recovered while I was busy with pregnancy preparations. Now they dote on their grandchild, becoming loving grandparents. At first, they were hesitant, feeling guilty towards me, but eventually, they began treating me like their real daughter again. Living together since birth, Emma jokes about how it's hard to tell who is the real daughter now. As for me, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl without any trouble. She's a very cute girl. I hope she grows up to be bright and cheerful like Emma. My friend and now sister, who I admire. Sophia. She won't stop crying.
Okay, I'm coming.
I hear my daughter's cries and Emma's troubled voice from the living room. Smiling, I responded and left the balcony. Outside, the sky is clear and cloudless. A future full of promises awaits us. Just like this bright blue sky.